All right, go ahead and bring this meeting of OPRD Commission to order. First, let's go ahead and do a round of introductions. We have one new face. We actually had two, but he's not feeling terribly well. So he's sitting it out today, but let's go ahead and do a round of introductions so that everybody knows who's here. And I'll go ahead and start. I'm Liz Hill, Chair of the Commission from District 2.
Vicki Berger, Vice Chair. I am from the Salem area. I believe it's Congressional District 5.
Melissa Cribbins. I'm from Coos Bay, District 4.
I'm Doug Durr from rural Clatsop County. I believe I'm now the District 1 Commissioner, in addition to being a coastal commissioner.
Go ahead.
Oh, and I'm Steve Shipsey, Counsel to the Commission, and I'm statewide.
All right, Commissioner Grassi, we'll go with you.
No, I'm Steve Grassi, and I'm the commissioner for east of the Cascades, and I'm from Burns.
And I'm Betty Izumi. I'm a commissioner for District 3 and I'm from Portland.
You want to go ahead and Lisa?
Good morning, Lisa Sumption, Director of Oregon Parks and Recreation Department and the State Heritage Preservation Officer.
Thanks. And I wanted to take a moment. We had such a beautiful tour yesterday of Kam Wah Chung. This is my first time here, and I think a number of the commissioners, it was also their first time. And I want to thank Kirk and Bridget and Christy for an amazing tour. It was to have this special gem right here in John Day is amazing, and to the history that it shows for this area and for the rest of the state of Oregon is so special. I can't wait to bring my kids back. I can't wait to bring my husband back. We're planning a trip next summer. So thank you for the amazing tour. Unless there's anything else you guys want to say about the tour yesterday. Anybody?
So
Go ahead.
I love the tour, but if I can, I want to take a second and go, these are around, and I'm advertising for Harney County. and Salem. But this is the Archaeology Roadshow, and there's a couple more events. One of them's in Burns next weekend, and they're amazing events about archaeology in Oregon.
That's from you. I wonder. I was like, thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to our agenda. First up, we have approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
A second. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes from April 22nd or 23rd and 24th, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Hearing none, passed. Next, we are moving on to approval of our agenda for the day. Are there any changes? Okay. Are we good with the budget piece of it?
So on B, we're going to do information. Is that right, Rebecca? Yes, on the approval. Yeah. So on B, we're going to make that an information item, not an action. We just have a lot.
So
going
for
on.
B, if the budget, it'll be information only, not action. All right. All right. Do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
I move that we approve as amended.
Commissioner Dewar, a second?
Second.
Great. All right. Now, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Hearing none, it is approved. All right. Moving on to our public comment period, I wanted to acknowledge the mayor of John Day, who is here today. Oh, where is he?
Counselor.
Oh,
Is
city
he out?
councilor.
City councilor. I'm sorry. And invite you if you wanted to say anything to go ahead and come up. Thank you. Maybe one day. Mayor.
That'll be next up here.
The last time I spoke before this commission, it was concerning Grass Mountain. I was a county commissioner.
I was going to say, you look so familiar now.
Very disappointed, but we tried. I just want to thank you for being here and recognize that Kam Wah Chung, I agree, is a very special place. I was volunteer of the year for the Park Service for I think 3 years ago. And I'm very disappointed that we only have it open now 5 days a week. And I would hope that the Park Service would see to backfill that spot so we could be open 7 days a week. People come from all over the world, literally, to see this place. And sometimes they don't check the website and they arrive here and cannot take a tour. And I spoke with some people the other day when they were there, and it was on a Wednesday. And I said, I give you a tour on the outside, but I can't take you on the inside. Unfortunately, they could not stay. And so they missed it. But I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that it is, well, you realize how important it is. And I want you to be aware that in Bend here, I believe in October, they're having a film festival, and they're going to be, for the first time in, I think, well, in the world, they're going to have a movie that will be premiered in the Bend Film Festival about Kam Wah Chung.
Oh, very cool.
One of the ladies that I know, they asked me if there was anybody that actually had worked on by the doc, and I said yes, and she is still alive, and I'm taking over to Bend, and she will be there. And I can't remember the exact date, but you might want to put that on your calendars.
Yeah.
And it's an extremely important thing. And have you seen our 3D presentation of Kam Wah Chung online?
Yes.
That is also, I've seen things there I've never seen before because it goes behind the line.
Yeah.
behind the scenes. But as a representative of John Day, I used to be mayor for several terms, but I'm just filling in now for a position. But I just want to thank you for being here. And if you have any questions about the city of John Day, we're growing and RV parks are really important. We are about ready, the county is about ready to put it some new RV places in John Day, and they're full. In fact, we just had graduation last week. We have something called 62 days this weekend in Canyon City, founding of gold in this particular area. And we just appreciate all you do for us. And Holiday Park is a gym. And thank you for finally allowing it to be reservations for at least some of the spots.
Right.
Because
Not
people
many people
came
say
in
that.
and they were very disappointed that they weren't able to get to. And that place, the people that run that are just awesome. And it is really cool. And of course, Bates too. Don't want to forget them. And we just had a person from Trans America Road Rally come through, 60 of them. They started in Astoria and on their way to Virginia. And they stopped in John Day. They were individuals, but it's a road race. And they're going to try and make it across the United States in 30 days. So I don't know if you can, I can't even make it 10
To
days
sail
in a
it.
car, much less a bike. But again, thank you for allowing me to speak. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm from Salem, live in the urban, and I love coming over to towns like John Day. And John, I've walked a lot the last 2 days in your town. It's wonderful. And the people were uniformly friendly. And this morning, I walked by the fairgrounds and here were the 4-H kids putting up these posters, and I'm on the state fair board. And I wish we could get sponsorships like you have. The support in a community like this is stunning, and it was so visual. And those kids were, I just sat and visited with them. It was a wonderful experience in your town.
Well, our 4-H auction, I'm sure Steve's aware of it in Harney County. We just had that last year, and hundreds of thousands of dollars are raised in that auction.
Oh,
It's amazing. It's
those
amazing.
kids were just,
That's all volunteer.
I know. And they said that they got the bad job. They were putting up the posters. The 4-H group that got the take them down had the easier job.
I'll agree.
We just really appreciate your support for Kam Wah Chung and all the stuff that we've been doing the last several
Please
years.
try and backfill that position. if you
Yeah,
can.
no, we hear you, and it is equally frustrating. It's too far to come. Like even folks that were here yesterday were like, if you're here, you need to get inside of that. Well, we have staff here. You can't come all the way and look at the outside. It's just such a special thing. And it was fun to watch the first time faces. Every time is special. So we just appreciate the partnership and all you guys do for and with us.
Commissioner Grasty.
No, I just want to say Chris is an old friend, and I appreciate you coming and telling the story from this side of the state. It's important we all hear it. You and I know it, and it's important for everybody else to hear it. As far as the livestock auctions go, I found years ago that I just gave a pot of money and said, here, spread this to whatever on the kids. And then I found the next year that, oh, here's the bill for what you, same amount you spent last year. So it's, yeah, it's a big deal and it is a lot of money to those kids.
And I will say that I hear Steve's going to be leaving the commission after 17 years.
Yeah, he'll be 8.
How many? 8?
8 years.
8 years, sorry. I need an application.
Awesome. Thank you
All
for
right.
being
Well,
here.
thank you so much for being here. Yeah. And we also want to acknowledge an employee with us who's retiring. And
Dennis Bradley, come on up.
Dennis.
Come on, Liz.
Oh.
So- All right, I'm gonna talk into the microphone so Steve can hear me. So this will feel a little bit awkward, but so I have been with Parks almost 18. Chris is looking at me like, don't mess it up. Okay, almost 18 years. And Dennis was like one of the first managers because we were actually, it was Cam Chung, I think is where I really first met you. Because he kind of navigated when that transition from the city back over to the state, and Curtis was still here. There were people sleeping in trailers. We might have caused a little bit of trouble that night. But he's been with us 42 years in the same management unit. I can't imagine what he has seen over 42 years and what he has endured, but he has been an incredible friend and an incredible manager, an incredible asset to OPRD and the community. He was the mayor of Mount Vernon. And he'd always just like very quietly, like, no, I'm the mayor. I'm like, like, tell me more. That's super cool. Like, you need to. And so we just wanted to present you with your recognition for 42 years at OPRD. And you are more than welcome, if you hold this, so Commissioner Grassi can hear you too, you're more than welcome to say, I'm afraid to do this.
No, thank you very much. It has been a long tour. Like I said, 5 directors I've been through since Dave Talbot. Yeah, I know them all. Yeah. So, Cam Chung is dear to my heart. Yes. 20 years at Cam Chung is like, learned a lot, and, you know, I have a lot of the historic properties on the east side. So, it's been fun working on those. French Glen Hotel, Pete French Round Barn, Sumter Dredge, you name it, I've done it. So thank you so much for this. Appreciate it.
Thanks for making time out of your new busy schedule. Hired on June 1st, and I think he's. Yeah, so.
I don't want to just be like weirdly lurking.
Yeah, that looks pretty weird. What's that person sitting there?
Yeah, Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, Chris Havel, the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. I'll get to the rest of the way through item 2 here on public comment. We did receive one written public comment before the meeting. That is included in your packet. I'll also email it to you because it has a link. Rather than have you retype it, you should be able to just click right on what I sent you in the email and you can watch a video that was provided as part of the public comment. It's related to Tubel and use of jet boats and boating on the river there. And that was the only comment that we received prior to the meeting.
That's great.
Thank
And
you.
we have nobody online who's,
Nope, nobody
Nobody in
online
the
and
room.
nobody else in the room.
okay, great.
Thank you.
Great. We will move on from public comment to the director's update. Lisa, do you have anything you want to share with us?
I think Katie's gonna go first, and then I may just quickly talk about restoration stuff.
Great. Think we're gonna be good. Okay, so Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, Katie Gauthier here with agenda item 3A. This is our Oregon Parks and Recreation Commission bylaws for the new commissioners. Let's see if we can do. I think I'm not doing to move it. I messed up there. Okay, sorry. So we'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have been talking about the bylaws. This commission currently does not have bylaws. We did a work session, you'll remember, in February, and then we had an informational item at the last commission meeting in April. And so we're bringing them here today with the intent that you would adopt bylaws. The intent of the bylaws is to codify current practices of the commission and things that are already in statute, but put them all into one place so that you know the roles for commissioners, the chair, and voting processes. So these bylaws were developed with a draft from other commissions, and then we've updated them based on your comments throughout the process. I'm going to go through the draft, and if there are any edits, we can make them. And in your packet, you do have an updated version from what was sent initially. We did make a few changes around the quorum to clarify that. As I go through, I will, in red, show you some of the updates that were made based on the information item, but feel free to interrupt if there are questions or any additions. So to begin with, we have the appointment process. You are a governor-appointed, Senate-confirmed commission, and the governor appoints the chair, and the commission selects the vice chair. And then we go on to the responsibilities of the chair. The chair presides over deliberations and meetings of the commission, calls for a vote on commission. And then the change here, we switched it from call to request special meetings of the commission, and then added that it may be called by a majority of commission members. To clarify that piece, the chair signs all documents in a timely manner, is the sole spokesperson to speak on behalf of the commission unless that has been delegated to another member, appoints members of committees as needed, and then is responsible for the hiring or removal of the director and annual performance measures for the director.
So can I ask you a question as we go on?
Yes.
Is G and H totally makes sense, but are all of those, I keep looking at including setting the qualifications. There's nowhere else other than the chair has that responsibility. And I guess it's understanding all the state requirements and all the nuances. Is that the right words, I guess?
It would be the chair's responsibility. I would assume the chair would work with the commission, but needing it to be one person's responsibility.
The actual language says lead the process.
Hmm.
Doesn't say total responsibility for, but says lead that process, set it in motion, get the team together. That's the way I would interpret that.
Right. Yeah.
And there is a designate additional members of the commission to participate in the process.
I'm just having this moment of there's nobody on the commission that actually led.
Right. It hasn't
You
happened,
haven't done
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, so the commission chair works with DAS and the agency to do that, and maybe a potential outside recruitment firm to do that. So you lead the process because you control the hiring decision, but you will not be technically in the weeds doing that. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm curious, on C, is there a reason why it was changed to request special meetings?
When we go to the role for committee members or commission members, they also have the ability to call for special meetings. So we wanted to make it clear that both the chair and the members of a majority of the members of the commission could do that. So instead of saying both of them could call, we had the chair could request and a majority of the commission members could call.
We've given the authority to the majority of the commission to call a special meeting, so it made more sense. And this was a conversation we had last time, that the chair could request that happen, but couldn't unilaterally call a special meeting. That's the way we left
I
it.
know, just being nitpicky, I guess I'm thinking, if you make the request, what would be the process for the rest of the commission to answer the request?
That's good. That can be done by email.
Okay.
That can be an electronic thing, because that's just procedural, so that
Okay.
the actual public meeting stuff would happen at the meeting that was requested and called.
I'm glad you brought this up, because Katie, I'm not totally, because I was the one that brought up the issue that the original was that only the chair could call. And I wanted to include the possibility of the commission calling itself without the chair. But I'm not sure that request chair, because I still want the chair to be able to call. And not just request, but actually call us in session if the chair requests, or if the chair wants us. I'm worried about this language takes the chair's power away. And what I really intended on this was to add the extra power of the majority of the commission being able to call themselves into session without the chair. Or if there was no chair, or
If you wanted to get rid of me.
I didn't say that. I think my comment was, these things only come up in really bad times. And in really bad times, you need flexibility. And so I'm not sure, Katie, if this doesn't take power away
Right.
from, this language doesn't take power away from the chair, which was not my intention.
I think it does.
The
The way it's written.
So maybe
Would
we
you
should
prefer it
change-
say call a special meeting of the commission, or it may be called?
Yes.
And
Instead
so
of
the question I
request.
have for our attorney is if that's okay. If we switch request to call, is that gonna create a problem?
I thought either worked. We had settled on request last time.
Did we?
After a robust discussion.
Use
But
the same
we could
word.
go back to call and just to clarify, the reason it has the option of a majority here is to highlight that both of those, the latter half of the sentence isn't a responsibility of the chair, but it's to highlight that it's not just the chair, that a majority can do it as well, in the instance that Commissioner Berger was contemplating where we have a runaway chair, not the current chair, but a runaway chair in the future.
Here.
Or not here, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could go back to call. I think that's fine. I think,
Does everybody feel comfortable with call?
Just a quick
Go ahead, Patty.
question to clarify. What happens if the commission, chair calls the meeting, and the members of the commission, like if you request it and people don't, is there an opportunity to say no to a request? Because if there's not, it should just be called.
I mean, what would happen is if it was requested and we didn't get a quorum, then no action could be taken. So I think we're fine in the instance, we would have the same situation. We called the meeting and still didn't get a quorum.
Thank you.
Still can't move.
Okay, so we will switch the word request to call. I don't know that I can do it on here very easily, but I will do it in the draft that we adopt. So moving, and I think we've gone through all of those. Any other questions through H? Okay. Then the responsibilities of the vice chair, the request was to move this into 2 bullets. So that has happened. The vice chair has the responsibilities of the chair when that's been delegated, and is those then are removed when the chair resumes their duties. And now on to responsibilities of commission members. Preparing for meetings, and then B was changed to match the statute. So it's a member who's absent from 2 consecutive commission meetings forfeits their appointment, and then we added the specific statute reference. So that's how the statute is worded. And then individual members may not exercise individually any administrative authority over the department or the commission. And then further, encouraging civil and respectful dialogue, and making sure that you're adhering to the ethics laws that you learned about yesterday, and completing trainings and adhering to policies as volunteers of the state and the department. Those are all of the commission member responsibilities. So now on to responsibilities of the staff, and we did not make changes there. So it's ensuring proper record keeping and public meetings law requirements are met, adequate time for the agenda to include public input and deliberation, ensuring communications from commissioners are addressed, assisting with your travel expense reimbursement and meeting scheduling, making sure there's thorough onboarding, ensuring quality presentations, coordinating with the director on the development of the agenda, and preparing minutes for your review and approval. And then on to the meetings. The change here was to make sure that the commission meetings are held quarterly across the state at a time, place, and manner determined by the commission. Commissioner Cribbins, did you? Okay. And then the commission may meet at other times for emergency or special meetings in a manner agreed to by a majority of the commissioners in accordance with the public meeting laws. So the in a manner was added to those. And then see that we will go by Robert's Rules of Order. We'll remove a comma right here that is unnecessary. Oh, that went too far if I click on anything. So there will not be a comma right there in the final rule. Except as provided, we're required to follow all public meeting laws, and information will be posted on our website. And a majority of the members constitute a quorum. We'll get to that on the voting a little bit further in detail. A vacancy does not impair the rights of the remaining commissioners to exercise power of the commission. Meeting minutes must be approved and follow state records retention requirements. The commission meetings will be broadcast live whenever possible and then posted on the agency website. And we did change the unofficial public comment will be allowed at the discretion of the chair, in person and virtually when possible. And then here's where the changes are from this is a little small too, but in your packet, you have the updated correct version. So this was to add information to help clarify some of the questions around this table. And if there are questions, I will defer to our esteemed attorney on many of this. But a majority of the members constitute a quorum. So we have 7 members, 4 constitute a quorum. An abstention is not counted as an affirmative or negative vote to make up the minimum number of concurring votes required to pass or reject a motion. And if a member abstains but is present, the member is still counted for the quorum purposes. So that's where we get to this table where sometimes 3 votes can count. Questions on that Commissioner Cribbins?
I do have one question. If seats aren't appointed, they still count?
Yeah.
Okay, that was all I was wondering. I figured there was a legal answer to that.
Yeah. So because we're a statutory body of 7, our quorum will always be 4, even if we have vacancies.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
We learned that
The hard way.
through some trial and error. So then votes will be taken by voice unless there's a request otherwise. And all votes will be recorded in the minutes. And then we added also information that you learned yesterday around conflicts of interest, but just to clarify that if there is an actual conflict of interest, you would abstain from deliberations and the vote unless your vote is needed, and then you can vote, but not participate in debate. So that is all the statutory language that you learned about yesterday.
And it's so pretty. Come in handy.
Oh, yeah.
So where on C, where it says where an actual conflict arises, do we also need to put where an actual conflict
Or
or
potential.
perceived
So
or
the
potential?
above, it says where a potential conflict of interest arises, the member shall publicly disclose and participate in the deliberations or voting. It's the where the actual that they don't vote. So that right above that is where we talk about the
Okay.
the potential. Does that answer your question?
Well, so even if you have a
If you have a potential. you
potential,
still-
You can vote.
Yeah. you
right, but I
potentially
mean,
put
you
it
may
on the
have, I guess
record.
you'd be abstaining at that point. If you said it's a potential and I want to abstain because I don't feel comfortable voting.
You would have the option of abstaining,
Mhm.
but after you've put a potential conflict on the record, then
You can
you
s-
have the ability
to
to
vote.
either
Mhm.
concur or reject a motion. Or abstain. You have all three options.
Okay.
It's just the situation when you have the actual conflict that you have to not vote unless your vote is necessary to resolve the motion. In which case you vote only, you don't
You can't debate.
participate
discuss,
in the discussion.
participate. Okay.
Any further questions on? Okay.
And,
Well-
and good news is, in what, 24 years? I've
Right.
Never had this come up, so
No.
it's there if we need it, but hopefully it'll be
I
a long
think
time.
Brad
so-
was the only one ever that we had a potential. There was a potential. Yeah.
So then we're on the last section is adopting the bylaws. We will have a written notification to all commission members with the proposed changes discussed at the next meeting, and then the commission would adopt the bylaws at a regular meeting and the changes would become effective immediately. So the request for you today is to adopt the proposed bylaws. As we have discussed today with the two changes that we would change 3C to call and remove a comment on 4C, remove a comma on 4C. And then they would be effective immediately.
Madam Chair, I so move.
Thank you, Commissioner Grasty. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Dewar. Any further discussion before we take a vote on this? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing none, these have passed. That's
Good
awesome.
job.
Thank you very much.
That's
Yes,
a
thank you, Katie.
first. So quickly before we move on to budget, I do want to try to start bringing regular updates back to you guys on the reservation system. I felt like you didn't get a lot last time and you approved like the largest single purchase the agency has ever entered into. So and it's a big deal. It's probably the biggest thing. I mean, we do a lot of really big things, but it's a really big deal to have something that's nearly 30 years old and moving from one reservation system to another. And so I want to make sure you guys are getting updates because I think as we get closer to implementation and transfer over, there'll be a lot more public comment and concern. And even if it's a better system, it's going to be different, right? So everyone's going to freak out, staff, visitors. So it will be different and it's a big deal. So I want to make sure you guys are getting regular updates. So we're still in contract negotiations with the new vendor Conduit. I believe it's over at DOJ for legal sufficiency at this point, but that has kind of drug out a little bit because, you know, anytime you enter into this, we're learning it's more, they're learning it's more, and, you know, you have these ideas of what it's going to look like, but you get into reality and it's looking a little different. So it's better to take the time and be thoughtful about that and make sure that we get what we need and that they're able to deliver what we want. So it's at that part of it's at DOJ. We've made the decision to go ahead and you'll see in the budget policy option packages to pull the call center from them doing it and actually reactivate our call center that we operated for 20+ years. We still have many of those folks in our info line. A lot of times they end up doing reservations just because it's second nature. And I prefer having the option of having that be staff. So that way, if there is a lull, they can work on things that are relevant to us. And they know our parks, they know our system, and it's going to be a better thing for us. The statement of work, we're still kind of going back and forth with the vendor. Once conduit's done, which should be soon, that will go back over to DOJ for legal sufficiency as well. What else is in there? So the thing that keeps me awake at night about it is the
Everything.
data from the old vendor to the new vendor, right? Because you heard even yesterday talking about Access and FileMaker Pro and Lotus 123, right? Like those, it's a very old, antiquated, different system than what we're going to, which is more modern. So we're working closely with them, and we're taking practice data dumps from the current vendor to the new vendor so we can better anticipate what's going to be coming over. We will still screw it up. We're going to make mistakes. I'm just going to say it out loud right now because it's not going to be perfect. I mean, it's a big transition, and but we're doing everything we can to try to limit those types of things that are going to occur. We've also identified the training lead, and we're in the process of doing interviews for the other folks that are going to spend time training. The biggest shift that has happened, and we anticipated this, we thought we'd roll it in November because there's never a good time to do this with staff, never. When we talk about seasons, they don't exist. And so we were thinking November probably made the most sense. It was the least busy time, but because of these negotiations and getting this in place, we're going to move to March. And so that was a hard decision, but it's the right decision. So gives a little bit more time. So it's going to be rough. There's no good, we have this dialogue at exec all the time. There is no good time. We're just going to have to jump in and do it. But we will have very good qualified staff helping us figure out how to navigate this, and it will be bumpy. You'll probably hear about it. My phone will be ringing constantly over it, but in a year, people are going to be super, super happy because it'll be different. I won't even say better, it'll be different. But I just want to make sure you all knew where that was, because I felt like we didn't give you a lot. And I think we need to bring this to you every meeting so you know what's going on with it, because it is public facing and you will be hearing things as we get closer. So any questions, comments? I know you have concerns. I'll hear those too. I probably already have them.
Is there an actual date that you're gonna move to it?
We just moved it from November to March.
But that's the date you'll do the change.
Yeah.
Not just the training. Okay.
No, we'll be training sooner. Yeah, but March would be the switch over. Did I miss anything, staff? Stephanie. Oh, okay, I thought she was saying that. Chris? Okay, all right, awesome. Okay, so we'll just start bringing you updates on that, just because I do think it's a very big deal and you need to be aware.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, we're moving on to the budget. Rebecca.
Hey, good morning, Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission. My name is Rebecca Jasso, and I'm the Financial Services Director for Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. The first brief I'm going to talk with you guys about today is brief 4A, and that's on the lottery forecast, which is also going to feed into the next brief that I'll be talking to you about. So the June forecast was released on May 29th. It does reflect a decrease in lottery revenue for the department of $34,500. The interesting part on this is since the close of session, even though this shows a decrease, lottery revenue has actually increased from the close of session for the current biennium by about $755,000. So when we closed the session, the forecast was $137,474,576. And as of June, it's $138,230,000. So there is still an increase. However, for the 25-27 biennium, it's decreased. And I have some charts that I'll be showing you with 4B. The other interesting piece on this is that it's looking like some of the minor declines from lottery forecast could be partially attributable to an increase in sports betting. And so that is probably going to continue to have an impact on our lottery funds. Any questions on lottery?
Sorry, I missed the piece about the sports betting. You said it's, can you just,
Yeah, so an increase in sports betting will actually decrease what we receive in lottery.
do we
funds.
have a projection of what those numbers are gonna look like?
You know, I could look in there. It's probably in the 100-page economic forecast that's in there. So we could take a look and see if they've actually gone down to like determining what the percentage is. At this point, I think the economists are just saying that they think that's what the cause of some of the decline is across the board.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You can't help but notice. People can now just pick up their phone and gamble,
Yeah.
right? They don't need to go to a machine. They can just pick up the phone and gamble, and it's heavily advertised, so they're doing it. And that's going to affect us. And I don't think we can know that technological change and how much it's going to affect us, but I guarantee you it will affect us.
Yeah. So we have that, and then we also have the 25% that is now going to local government grant program, which benefits the local government grant program, but decreases our operating. And so.
Budget. These are
Can you
budget holes.
briefly explain why the sports betting decreases our revenue?
No, decreases our revenue
So it,
because they
then-
can vote on they can just bet on their phone. And so the mechanism that they're doing doesn't have that revenue.
thank you.
Well.
I missed my technical. He came over here to help and now he's not here. So let me see if I can figure this out.
You gotta play some notes.
Are you
I'm
gambling
looking for
over
my
there?
PowerPoint.
Let's say, who do you want?
Yeah.
French Open final, who do you want?
And
Stop
here you go.
gambling.
So while you're looking there, is lottery thinking about the very point that Commissioner Burton just brought up and are we?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to fill that hole?
In my heart of heart, I hate it that we're living off sin taxes. Okay, but we are, and here we are talking about how we can get more gamblers to feed their addiction. I'm so conflicted over this, I can't tell you.
That's in conversation with Mr. Kuligowski. many
Yeah.
times.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission. Again, my name is Rebecca Jasso and I'm the Financial Services Director for Oregon Parks and Recreation. I'm now going to talk to you about agenda item 4B. This is an update on the 25-27 agency request budget. Normally at this point, I would be coming to you for approval. We've talked at a couple of the last meetings regarding the change in the process with the new governor and changes in management and Department of Administrative Services. We just received approval from our CFO and from the governor's office late last Thursday. At that time, we also received information from them on changes to our state government service charges. So with these changes, it has kind of delayed some of our processes that we're going through, along with having 4 new, well, actually, as of tomorrow, there'll be 3 new budget team members that have been with the agency for less than a year. And This is their first time doing the state budget process. So it has been quite a learning experience for us. So when we put the agenda together, I was pretty sure that I was going to have all of these things ready for you guys to review. And that just has not happened. We are still working on current service level. There are some pieces, hopefully by the end of next week, that will be finalized. And a lot of these pieces we can't do until we get the current service level done. But I do have some things that I want to talk with you guys about today. And this is a little bit more in lottery. And what we wanted to do, me and the team, is we wanted to kind of show what the impact is on lottery and what is going forward. So this chart shows the blue bars are the agency request at forecast. And then we have the gray bar, which is what the close of session forecast was. And the green bar shows what we actually received in lottery funding for each one of these bienniums. And then that red striped one is what the current forecast is. So you can see that, especially in 21-23, we received more in lottery actually than what was forecasted and what was originally budgeted. Continues even into 27-29, showing an increase. This chart here just shows kind of the quarterly forecast that's going through. We wanted to kind of show you what happened at the close of session in May 2023 for the 23-25 forecast and the 25-27 forecast. So you could kind of see where those changes are at. With the new team and kind of what Lisa was talking about earlier, we have a fresh set of eyes looking at this. They're really digging into what was given to you previously, kind of what their understanding is. You're going to start seeing things hopefully a little bit different that will provide you a little bit more information, but we really kind of want to lay this out in a simplified manner, and that is making sense.
So can I ask, back up one slide? We think about, maybe I'm the only one that is interested in this, but I would love to see one more column added to this of what do we get if you separate out the county portion? What's that look like?
We have it.
That's coming up.
It's coming up.
That's coming up. Because that was one of the things that Courtney and I were like, we really want them to see what that.
Significant.
Yeah. So this one shows you the kind of what is the green bar is the county portion. And so it shows you when it was at the 12%. And then in the 23-25 biennium, it moved up to the 25%. So we added that additional 13. And then in 25-27, the green line that shows up here, this is just kind of our, we wanted to show an estimated trend line on what it would look like if we were at the 12%, right? So you can see the difference, especially in from 21-23 to 23-25, what we actually are now projecting that we're going to get. There's quite a drop from what we would have gotten if we were still at the 12%. Does that make sense? Like, I'm looking at.
So what I've always been curious about, could never see a projection to understand it, is are the actual dollars, not percentages, actual dollars, were they going to drop? year to year because of that many-year-old decision to change this. I mean, we knew it was coming all these years, but does the dollar of income that from lottery actually drop or not? And I'm not sure what that shows here, looking at this.
So the lottery doesn't, well, it drops from the forecast, right? And we do see some decreases. But from our standpoint, where our impact is the amount that we will receive operationally will decrease. And so that's what this is showing, is if this gray stripe bar was back down to the 12%, this blue bar would be closer up to where the green line is at. So
Forgive me for being dense, but you're talking percentages really.
Yeah.
So does the dollars, so I see 79 million in 1921, I see 120 in 21, 23, and it's 103 is the forecast it's going to be in 23, 25. Is that right?
Mhm. Correct.
So any idea why 21, 23 was so big? Is that just an anomaly of the amount of betting that was going on? Or the law?
Yeah, there is just an increase in the lottery.
It's called the
And-
COVID bump.
Mhm.
That's the
And
COVID bump.
Yeah.
that was also when they retroactively went back into our current biennium and went from 13 to 25%. Which was a very unusual move, is that they did a reverse look, and in our current biennium, they took it from 13 to 25, not for the next biennium. We'll get you, Rebecca, that spreadsheet that Courtney did that actually laid out the difference between the 12 and 25 and our operating balance I think is more what he's looking for. I will send you a graph that makes it very clear what it did to us operationally.
She didn't include that in the
Yeah.
PowerPoint.
Yeah.
so.
So what, I mean, we're here now, so it's academic, but what I've always wondered is why we weren't looking at the number that we would have projected instead of saying, we're up here and we know we're gonna drop. It looked to me like it would have been prudent to be more focused on what if it was 25% today, 4 years ago? But we're there now. And
So we've always been looking at it, knowing that it was coming. We knew exactly when it was coming. The thing that was a little different is that they retroactively went back in a current operating budget that we never anticipated. We literally had Steve at the 11th hour write a letter of, advice to legislative admin to say, hey, wait a minute, like this doesn't even feel legal. And it is what it is, but it took a significant, I can't tell you right now without seeing it, the exact number, but it was a big hit in our current operating budget, which we had already allocated and expended. That's what was different.
Yeah. The other piece to note too is that even though lottery funds have kind of stayed consistent, and now we're seeing that impact of that additional 13% not being part of our operations. It hasn't kept up with increases in expenses. So things like COLA, fuels and utilities, construction. So while it's been consistent, it's not staying current with what current is costing us. So both factors have created a decrease in that idealized margin of where we would want to be. And it's probably going to continue over the next couple biennia. So normally in the agency request budget, we would be through current service level. And with this new process, we're not. We have identified our base budget and our personal services costs. We're going through now and we're doing any phase outs from the last biennium, those one-time costs and any phase ins. Next week, DAS will be entering in the standard inflation rate for us. So once we get to that piece of the budget, we'll be able to do our reduction options, the 10% reduction options that are required. We'll also be able to take a closer look at policy packages. On the revenue side, we know where we're at from the lottery portion. The staff has done a lot of work as far as the forecast and the projections for other funds. Lisa had a meeting with Courtney Zarazov, who is our lead budget analyst, last week, and on Thursday, and her and I met Friday morning, and neither one of us were like really confident and comfortable with where the other funds projections were going. We need to really take a look at the impact of GO bonds and the closures of the parks and what impact that has on our park user fees and the revenues that are coming in. The person who, the revenue analyst, has only been with the agency for 3 months and new to state government too. So our revenues are, even though we're considered a small to medium agency, we're pretty complex. And it's not quite as simple as a general fund agency. And there's a lot of different factors to learn. So we are still digging in a little bit more on the other fund revenue to make sure and taking a look at what we are actually receiving in and kind of the impact of park closures and what that's going to look like. So hopefully by July, which we actually don't have an option. We have to have this done by then. So once we get through all of this, then we will know what our ending balance is and kind of what kind of reserves we need to have. So staff are doing a lot of really good work on this to this point. They're just not quite there yet. Anything you want to add, Director?
Do you have a lot more?
I was going to go into policy packages next.
Okay. So I wanted, it became abundantly clear to me last week that there's this insurgence of things happening, whether it's brand new staff here on our side. We have, she said the revenue person is 3 months. The revenue person is no longer with us. So we have nobody sitting in that position. Our Courtney is brand new to state government, and the team does not have the ability at this point without some additional training and some outside support. And our legislative fiscal office person is new. Our chief financial office person is new. There's this, and we knew this was coming in state government. It's not on the central business service side, whether it's budget, HR, like there's not a lot of people coming up into these roles. So we made the decision last week to pause rather than having you guys approve it. I don't want to alarm you. I think we just don't understand the logic of the spreadsheets and the way we built things previously. And so Stephanie and I have been reaching out to a couple of retirees that know it very well, that we hope will be on board with us here in the next week or so to help staff get more comfortable and confident. I mean, literally in an hour meeting, I think Matt and I were with Courtney on Thursday and we found like $20 million in an hour just by an error in the spreadsheet. Because if you don't understand the logic of how these are built, they're very complex, as Rebecca said. So we're going to have the special meeting in July. We'll bring back the budget detail with a lot more confidence of where we are. So I apologize that we don't have this where it needs to be, but we need a little bit of time to dig in a little bit further.
We do. And we also are not only the new CFO analyst, but we also have a new legislative fiscal analyst who is learning the agency and asking a lot of questions too. So there's a lot. Before I get into policy packages, I did want to talk a little bit about state government service charges, which is also having an impact on our revenue and our ending balance. You guys heard a little bit yesterday about the print and the 8% administrative fee. that's one area in the state government service charges in the price list where DAS is silent. So we don't know if they're going to increase that 8%. But what we did find out on the Thursday afternoon is that our state government service charges is increasing by 28.67%. So we are from the currently in the, and that's not showing on here. I apologize. I don't have a slide for it. In 23-25, our state government service charges is 9.9 million. In 25-27, they will be 12.8 million. So there is a significant increase on state government service charges. Our largest increase, I mean, there's a lot of big increases, but really our risk management charges is where we're seeing significant. So as an example, under liability, auto in general, we're seeing a 77% increase in that line item. For property, it's
Property.
almost 26% of an increase. And workers' compensation, we're seeing a 67% increase. So just for the risk charges and risk management, that's a 43% increase across the board. The risk charges are really hard to calculate and to manage. I've reached out to DAS Risk in the past, and they're like, oh, it's complicated. It's this whole formula, and it's really hard to explain. And at the time that I had done it, it actually came back that something that had happened 10 years ago was just hitting our assessment. So the fires haven't even hit yet. I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years with the fires, but it's one of those things that we don't have a lot of control over, and we really don't know when we're going to see the impact of it. So we have to just kind of at the whim of DAS on that one. And the other one that has a significant increase is the Attorney General fees. So the this was one that the hourly rate increased by almost 27%. So it went from 275
Totally worth it.
hour to 348 dollars per hour.
Bargain.
So, right.
Compared to private, it is.
It is, but we do have a significant Attorney General budget line item, and so we'll see an increase in that area too. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on that. I don't know what's going to happen through session. This is again, right, we had to do technical adjustments to the director's budget for the last, it had to do with the changes to the state government service charges line item. DAS had put in a package to increase all of this stuff, and the legislature changed their priorities. So we'll be watching this one, but for agency request, we're going in with almost a 30% increase on that one line item. The other thing that you have is policy packages, and did you give them a handout? Okay, so you also have a handout that has a little bit more detail to it. This is the list that Department of Administrative Services and the Governor's Office have approved. Because of the cash flow and some of the uncertainties in that area, we were kind of surprised that they're like, all of your packages are approved. We're like, really?
We don't have that money.
We don't have money. We're not on the same page as you. But the executive team has gone through and has prioritized this list. The handout that you have is updated from this PowerPoint slide. It was updated on Monday morning. It also gives you a little bit more detail of information. So when you're looking at this, it really doesn't give you whole lot, right? So we included the pages behind it for you to take a look at. On the handout that you received, the light blue areas, and those are basically 13 through 16 policy package requests. As we're going through and fine tuning and finalizing the beginning and ending balances and where we're at and making sure that we have reserves, those items will be the ones that will be the first to be cut from this priority list. Lisa had mentioned the reservation call center on here. And so that is priority 4, and it's ID number 25-05. This one is, we have 6 permanent positions. 3 of those positions are seasonal positions for the call center. The other piece on this too is, once we kind of get a finalized list, budget staff will actually go through and true up the costing on it to make sure that they're accurate. Priority number 0, honor past award obligations. That is not included in the total calculation because that's where we're phasing out from this current biennium and carrying over to the 25-27. 61 million is more than what we normally do, but about 34 million of that is local government grant program funding. So they do have those grants that have been awarded, but they won't start spending on them this biennium. So that's kind of a carryover. And the funding is already there, so you're not going to see it in that bottom calculation. Are there any questions on policy packages?
And just so you know, I mean, these were things that everybody brought forward, but depending on what our cash ending balance is, we'll take them on the priority list and they may all come off if we don't really have as much money as we need going forward. But this is the dream.
Yeah.
I love that about budget.
Yeah. The 25-17, the increase in park fee rate ranges. Katie's going to be talking to you about that this morning. And so once we kind of know what the direction is on that, then budget staff will start adding in the revenues on that. And that obviously is going to have an impact on being able to fund some of these policy packages and other things we're doing. No questions on policy packages? You guys are making this easy for me. Okay. The other piece that we are required to do, and this is one of those areas of the budget that's completed, we are required to submit a management ratio. So in 2017, there is state agencies were required to have a supervisory ratio of 11:1. And rules were in place about filling positions when the ratio was not met. So basically, DAS has said, if you don't meet your ratio, you can't hire a management position or establish a management position. So as part of the budget in the current budget, our approved rate is 9.5:1. So we received an exception from the 11:1 due to our business, right? Our 24/7 operation, the locations of our parks, the number of volunteers that we have, working with the prison workers to come in. And so just the different supervisory needs that we have. For 25-27, we're proposing a 9:1 ratio for us. This is in alignment with what DAS currently has for our ratio. So I don't believe we've ever had any pushback on this in the past. The next step on this is we'll be notifying the unions, both SEIU and AEE, with what our ratio is.
So do you know what that ratio actually looks like if you figured in the volunteers?
It is. So the
Have to.
9 to 1 includes our volunteers.
It includes it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would have thought.
So I've gone through and pulled a report by the number of volunteers and the hours that they worked and calculated that into our total FTE for the agency and how many management positions we have and supervisory positions and represented positions. So that does include our volunteer hours.
Do seasonal employees, how do they factor into that calculation?
They are permanent employees.
Choose-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it will just, that's where we get those weird 0.67, right? Because if they're a 9-month seasonal or less, then that kind of shifts that FTE number. But they're included in this.
Okay, thanks.
And then the last big piece, we will calculate this in 2017 again. There is a requirement put in place for the governor's budget to include an amount for statewide deferred maintenance that is at a minimum of 2% of current replacement value of state-owned buildings and infrastructure. And so we will be calculating that once we have, because that includes CSL and any policy packages that we have for deferred maintenance would count towards that 2%. We generally already have it covered in our budget. And so we usually don't have to do an increase for that line item.
So a question really is more for you than anything else. And this is a pet peeve of mine, but every time I see a Senate Bill 1067, there's no way to track that. I mean, there is a way, but it's very difficult. And I bet I'm better at it than a lot of people.
Mhm.
There's a statute that refers to.
We can start
My
adding
suggestion
statutes.
is Put the
Yeah.
statute there.
Totally.
Okay.
Especially since it gets replaced all the time. So
Yeah, when he gets
Yes.
it.
Yeah. yeah.
Any other thoughts, comments?
Very.
Are we all
got more?
done?
No, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's sombering news.
Welcome. More to come in July.
Yeah, it's our requirement to review and approve a budget.
Totally.
As a commission, I always feel somewhat disconnected in my ability to impact it, except when Katie comes up and we talk
Policies.
rates.
Yeah.
I am becoming more and more appreciative as things become more and more difficult across government that we are brought this information, even the bad information, and I would encourage staff to continue to give us bad information. The worst thing as a policy board is to suddenly do what happened to my school district recently and realize the bills aren't being paid. So while it's a difficult conversation, I would please encourage staff to continue to converse with us about even the bad news.
Absolutely. We just need to know how bad the news is. Because if I would have talked to you on Thursday, I probably would have said, you guys could exercise that finding a new director thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, next up, we're moving to property on our agenda, and we're going to start with Lucky Mute. Exchange of easements. With Alice.
Chair Hill, Director Sumption, Commission, Alice Fields, OPRD Property Agent. I'm here, excuse me. I'm here today to talk to you about,
Yeah.
I'm
thank
here
you.
today to talk to you about some real estate activities that we are working on. So I'm presenting you with some informational items on real estate activities. For the Lucky Mute State Landing, item 5A, we are proposing an exchange of easements with the Greenbelt Land Trust. Again, excuse me, don't know where that's coming from. Greenbelt Land Trust recently acquired property in Polk County that is adjacent to our Lucky Mute Landing. Our Lucky Mute Landing State Natural Area is composed of 2 units, a north and a south unit. The property that they acquired is in between these 2 units and connects, thank you very much, connects to both properties. Their property also has an additional 1/2 mile on the Willamette River. So it continues on from ours. The land trust has offered to provide a recreational trail easement over their land that would connect our north and south units for public use. And we have, for many years, OPRD has felt this would be a very beneficial item for the public. The second easement that we are possibly working with doing is a reciprocal easement between the 2 parties that would be for management and maintenance purposes. It would be basically a road easement. Most of it will occur on existing roads on those properties. The roads that are there have been used for agricultural purposes for many years, so it wouldn't be a matter of developing new roads. The 2 easements are currently being surveyed at this time, and we anticipate coming before you again in the very near future for approval of granting the easement and accepting one from them. Yeah, I apologize. The maps are all part of the same presentation here, and I apologize for that. So as you can see, we have a north and a south unit. They own this property in between. And we are currently having surveyed and hope to come before you in the future with are these 2 easement areas. The yellow being the public trail easement, the orange being the road maintenance easement.
Any comments, thoughts? All right. Thank you, Alice. I think we're moving on.
Okay, move on to item 5B, which is information on a acquisition of a property at Brian Booth State Park. OPRD had identified this property as a property of interest for many years now. Recently, the owner reached out to us to say they would be interested in selling the property to OPRD. As we met with the owner and discussed what they had in mind and what this would be, it became clear that acquiring the property and granting them a life estate would be of best interest to both parties. The 32-acre property consists of a 13-acre area of wetland that we had identified in the past and tried to acquire even separately. There is also a segment of South Beaver Creek that runs through this property. And there's some very nice upland forest areas. There are some improvements on the property. There is a manufactured home on the property and outbuildings. And our access road into our adjacent lands runs through this property. So in addition to expanding the trail network at Brian Booth State Park and conserving some additional wetlands in the Beaver Creek area and providing some more recreational opportunities, the existing residents in the future could be used for employee housing, which is something we typically need in those areas. And staff envisions the property fitting nicely into our long-range goals for the park. We've recently requested appraisal work to be done on the lands, And we'll proceed with the additional due diligence that we need to do before coming before you in the future to request approval for this acquisition.
Commissioner Berger?
And it's my understanding that the county is aware of this negotiation and is looking favorably at this proposal. Is that true? Or would you rephrase that?
I mean, I don't know that I can publicly or officially say that with
Well,
asking that question
at
of them.
least they're aware of it.
But they're absolutely aware of it.
Okay, so they have the opportunity before we do anything to opine.
They could do it here.
I just want staff talking to the county about this.
Hmm.
And I want to be sure they're
I will
doing it.
call the county commissioners on my way home today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Questions, comments on Brian Booth?
It's clear that this resolves some access issues, it appears, and just supports the general park operations, the larger park. So, yeah, I appreciate the work on this. Having toured out there recently, not that long ago with the commission, we can appreciate how that was an important access point to the larger piece of property on that eastern end of the parklands. So, yeah, it makes sense. Thanks for your work on it.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item 5C, Haystack Hill. I think we have Tabitha for this one, who's online.
One moment, Doug's gonna get Tabitha there for me. Sorry.
You're good, Tabitha.
Tabitha, we can't hear you on our end. So we're working on it.
It's good hearing.
Let's try that.
Yep, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Apologies, we've got two different mute settings here, it looks like with Zoom. Okay, I apologize. My name is Tabitha Henriksen. I'm one of the OPRD property agents. Chair Hill, Director Sumption, commissioners. I'm bringing for you today an informational item regarding a potential disposition we may be asking you to consider in the future for Haystack Hill State Scenic Viewpoint. So we have talked about properties in this area at several recent meetings. The map you see in front of you, we discussed in our last meeting a potential acquisition from the Holland family. That's what's indicated in the orange above, to the north of the existing state park. And the Holland family is interested in collecting donations in order to basically buy out the family's interest in that property and see it joined with Haystack Hill for some sort of overall public land management. We, in continuing conversations with partners that include representatives of the Holland family and those of the local community, we have kind of shifted our game plan a little bit from a potential acquisition by state parks of the Holland property to the Holland family is now working on those efforts to potentially donate that land to the city of Cannon Beach. And we would like to consider Haystack Hill State Scenic scenic viewpoint as joining that and becoming an overall larger local managed park. The property currently has multiple deed restrictions. So I'm going to bring those up. These include use solely for public park and scenic purposes. There are permissions to develop a road and parking area on the site, but as you can see with the LiDAR map, that might be kind of challenging just with the topography there. There is a prohibition on the site for picnicking and overnight camping. No buildings may be constructed besides comfort stations or park maintenance buildings. There's a requirement for indigenous plantings only there on the site. And then Mr. Yan, who donated this property originally to the state park system, he was very concerned about the view shed from other surrounding parks as well. So there's a requirement that the northern slope of the property must remain forested, and limited permissions for ODOT to potentially utilize a narrow strip along the east boundary for highway widening. These restrictions would all go with the property in any sort of transfer that we might propose to the city of Cannon Beach. And the Holland family has also expressed that as much as possible, they would like to copy these deed restrictions and how they restrict their property to the north in a transfer potentially to the city. So this is early in the state in our process. We'll be doing due diligence on this property and seeking feedback from our internal subject matter experts as far as whether or not this is a good candidate for disposition. But we wanted to make you aware of this and see if there was any comments or any advice that we should move forward with.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dewar. I assume you
Even
wanted to
before my
speak.
hand was up. Thank you. Thank you, Tabitha. And thank you to all the staff who've been working on this one. I really appreciate your continued work with the Holland family to help look at options there. And I also appreciate your work directly with the city of Cannon Beach regarding the Haystack Hill property. As many of you know, this property is, while it's not visited much because the facilities there are limited, it is a very important green space and important within the larger view shed of Cannon Beach, the view from the beach, the view from Haystack Rock, and the view from adjacent parklands. And so it really does contribute in an interesting way. It also provides a kind of buffer between Highway 101 and the community. So it's of much interest. And I understand from what I'm hearing as we hear potential scenarios within the community, there's an interest in seeing more local control, but also that these deed restrictions move forward in time so that these same values that John Yan brought to the conservation of this land still continue to guide the future management of this land. And so Tabitha, I appreciate you talking about those and what they consist of, and also providing the reassurances that those carry forward with the property. And I guess I get to really pin that down a little bit more. I might also ask staff or even our legal counsel, just in a hypothetical scenario, some future city council someday decides that they want to say develop this property for some purpose that is inconsistent with park use. Procedurally, what happens? Does it come back to OPRD? Does it go back to the Yan family? How does that work? If suddenly we saw something like that occur, not that this is likely to occur, but when we hear members of the community expressing concern about the various hypothetical futures, these are the kinds of scenarios they tend to envision. So I was just wondering if you could kind of clarify that in the event of a deed restrictions that are now 2 steps away from the original one or 2 steps away from the original transaction. Thanks.
Tabitha, do you want to discuss a little bit about the reversionary clause?
Yeah, I can. So there is an existing reversionary clause in our current deed that there is potential for it to go back to the Yan family. However, in our transfer deed, just as we've done in many of our recent transfers to other recreation entities, we would be very clear about what would basically trigger some additional actions that the city may need to take in order to illustrate that they're managing the property within the restrictions that we've laid out. Otherwise, it would revert to state parks. So we can absolutely capture that in the language of the deed as long as we're very clear about what triggers those items and what our expectations are with the city.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Any further comments on this piece for Haystack? Hearing none, let's go ahead and move on to Fort Yamhill, which is also with Matt, so convenient that he's up here.
Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, for the record, Matt Rippey with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. I'm here today with an informational item, 5D or E, I think it may have been changed to D, with a Fort Yamhill State Heritage Area transfer. This is a brief that was brought to you back in June of 2022 as an informational item, but because we have new commissioners and some time has passed, and also because of the fact that we anticipate a potential transfer taking place later this fall, we wanted to bring this back to your attention. Here's some background about the property. This was a property that was purchased right around 2004, and shortly after the property was purchased, staff developed a park master plan that was done in cooperation with the Grand Ron and has a shared vision that you can see there at the top of the slide that really set the tone for how the property was going to be managed. The thing that I would like to point out under the logistics, one is the property is not a very efficient park for OPRD staff to manage. It's an hour-and-a-half round trip from the management unit office to the park to take care of it. And the other thing that I wanted to underscore is that it is an inholding within the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ron Reservation. In fact, the park entrance, I'll show a slide in just a moment. The entrance to the park actually goes through the Grand Ron Reservation property. And so because of those two factors, we feel like it would be better managed by the Grand Ron. As you may remember, again, from the brief back in 2022, we attempted to transfer this to the Grand Ron at that time, but there was no language in statute that permitted a state agency to transfer at no cost to a federally recognized tribe in Oregon. Because of that, we did enter into a memorandum of agreement with the Grand Ron to help kind of co-manage the property until we could get to a point that we could transfer the property. That's been a great process, and I think has established some long-term relationships between the two that will extend long after the property is transferred. In February of 23, House Bill 2737 was passed that does now allow for state agencies to be able to transfer at no cost land to any of the 9 federally recognized tribes. You can see that language there. The last thing that I want to note is that with any deed transfer that State Parks is involved in, it will include standard reversionary clause language, and this property under ownership and management of the Grand Ron will remain open to the public as well. Are there any questions?
Mr. Grassi.
So when did this land come into ownership of the park system?
It was in the early 2000s. I want to say the master plan was done in 2004, so it was somewhere right in between there. And I can go back and find the exact dates for you, but it was in the early 2000s.
From the county, right?
I believe so, yes.
I believe Polk County owned it previously. Polk County.
Polk it. Okay, thanks.
Portions of it. Thank you, Alice.
Commissioner Dewar.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I, for one, just want to express my appreciation to you and again, just all the staff involved with carrying this forward, this long conversation with Grand Ronde about the future of this land and what works for all parties. And so I know that there were a number of steps to that conversation. I appreciate you sticking with it and really finding something that worked for everybody. By and large, I'm hearing a lot of enthusiasm from the tribe and interest in carrying this forward as owners of this land. So I appreciate that and mostly just want that to be expressed. But also, I guess I'd ask, how will the visitor experience be different here in, let's say, 5 years from now, based on this change in ownership? What's different?
That's a great question, Commissioner Dewar. Thank you. I think a couple of things will change. One, I think the site will be managed more holistically. Again, right now it's divided a little bit between when you enter the park, there's the powwow grounds, there's the traditional building, and then you come up into the old fort site. So I think that those will be managed more as one site. So I think it'll be a little bit more seamless. I also think that because of the history of the site and from the perspective of the Grand Ronde, that story will be able to be better told. It's their story to tell, and they'll be able to tell it there. I also think that their engagement with some of the settlement history and the fort history and kind of that the juxtaposition of those two stories are going to be told a little bit better. And again, in a way that I don't think that state parks can tell that. So I see those things changing. Does that?
No, that's great.
Okay.
They're one of the few tribes I work with that actually has their own interpretive development wing, which is kind of remarkable and should be, it'll be interesting to see what they do here. I appreciate that. So thanks.
We're excited to see it.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other comments on this? All right. Well, this is really neat. So thank you for all your work on it.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to keep chugging along, and now we are on 6 community engagement, A, which is Bald Hill Farm request to register 800+ acres to natural area register.
Good morning, Chair Hill, OPRD Commission, and Director Sumption. My name is Chris Parkins. I'm the Central Operations Resource Manager for the agency, and I will be presenting item 6A to you this morning, which is referred to as a community engagement item. It may look similar to some of the items that you saw presented by Real Estate Services, and there will be some amazing pictures and beautiful maps and whatnot. What makes this item a little bit different is it's about property that we do not own or are not looking to acquire or dispose. So what I planned this morning is ordinarily these items are prepared by one of my staff members, our lead natural resource specialist, and he had presented to you back in September about the program of state natural areas. And I think that presentation might have been a little bit long and definitely longer than the time we have today. But I did ask him if I could borrow that so I can, for the benefit of the new incumbents that are on the commission now, to give a little background about what the program is. And then I'll talk about a property specifically that we're making a recommendation on, and then I'll wrap it up at the end. So thank you again for your time today. And I apologize for this little, whatever you call this classification thing, that we classify all of our documents now by level. And obviously, when I was doing my homework, I forgot to remove that. So it makes it feel like you're reviewing a confidential document.
Yeah.
So this map here color codes different states by their level of state natural areas, how they manage them. And let me preface this with, the brief was 19 pages. This presentation is 19 slides, and I have another presentation that's 10 slides. We're not going to read all of that. So that's what I'm starting with. If anybody is interested in this particular presentation because they weren't here in September, I'd be glad to share that, or also offer up Noel Batchelor to present again to the commission if they so decide to do that. So don't worry that you can't read every word. Don't worry that I skim kind of fast. Otherwise, I'll be here till 3 and you don't want that. So this map highlights the different ways that states manage their state natural areas, natural area programs. And gray is effectively that there's no program whatsoever in the state. That doesn't mean that there aren't other ways that people are protecting natural resources in special areas, but just not a program like this. And then Oklahoma is the only state whose the totality of their program is just managing a registry. And then the pink states also work with other, they describe it as administratively inactive. I'll just leave it at that. The more active programs are the green and the yellow. In the green states, there are more entities helping manage those programs in those states. In here, we're the primary manager by statute. That's been in effect since 2012 or so. And there is another partner, if you will. We'll talk about Orbic. I'll define what Orbic is and their role in a review as well. This is a brief history, won't be a test, as I warned you or told you, committed that I won't read every word on here, but essentially it describes how the Natural Areas Preserves Act was passed back in the 70s, and that's what got this whole ball rolling. And there's been different changes over time of who is managing the program and who manages the registry and all of that. So if we skip down here to the bottom though, and look down here, 2001, you'll see that the legislature created the Institute for Natural Resources at Oregon State University. And that program, its current iteration, if you will, and us are the main stakeholders in reviewing when properties are recommended for a state natural area recommendation. I'll go into more detail on that in just a moment. So in 2012 was the year that the scepter was handed off and the program was renamed from Natural Heritage Program to State Natural Areas and transferred to OPRD. So generally the goals of the program are to set aside special properties. If you think back to yesterday when we were at Kam Wah Chung, if you recall, when the region resource manager, Bridget Tinsley, was out front with the group in front of Kam Wah Chung, she talked about how back in the late 1800s and early 1900s in this area, that type of Chinese community like would have been there established around the Kam Wah Chung building was not uncommon at that time, but the remnants and evidence of that these days is much more uncommon and makes that rare and a treasure. And that's why that property has been set aside and why it's so special. I believe this program is pretty similar to that. If you think of it as setting something aside so it protects it in type of a snapshot in time, and also with the benefit of being there to serve for scientific research and that type of thing. So with these properties that are recommended for state natural area designation, they may only have one or two things that really stand out about them. They have to meet the area, state natural areas plan criteria for certain things that Oregon is looking to set aside and make sure that we preserve some record of. That plan also manages it in a very discrete way. So it can tell you that, oh, well, if this type of ecosystem we don't have any acreage set aside, or this one, we have more than enough, have already fulfilled the goals of the program. So we won't accept any more. That's where Orbic comes in. That's what they do. There's two things that they do. They help with that vetting of, do we need more property that satisfies these criteria for these particular ecosystems? Or they also do managing of the database. You've probably heard of Orbic before, and that they manage the database that all of our natural resource specialists and foresters and such refer to when they're looking at where there are threatened and endangered species known across the state. So it's the same database. This is the plan. This is what I talked about, describes what we're looking for in different ecosystems or threatened and endangered species and that type of thing, of habitats that we would want to set aside. Notice that the plan is about 10 years old. So when I came on into my role, my core role, less than a year ago, I sat down with Noel and we talked about this plan and plan to plan. So in 2025, we'll be picking up how to renew our plan, but this is the current plan right here. He'd like to describe it as a Noah's Ark. So yes, it's setting aside like certain rare species or their habitats and plant communities. And we'll go more into that when I talk about this property specifically. And I'd like to extend a quick apology. I just realized this is like the Tom Cruise thing where there's like all these screens moving around and stuff. It's like, and I realized that I'm thinking you're looking at one slide and you're perhaps not. So if I caused any confusion, my apologies. There are a couple of different levels of state natural area. You can nominate your property to be registered or dedicated. Dedicated is considered more permanent. All of the submittals for these are voluntary. And there is a variety of landowners that have this designation on their properties. It can be private, a conservation, like a nonprofit NGO, state, or even a federal agency. Usually the only time a federal agency is if they have, if the designation was approved before they own the property, and then it kind of went along as a pertinent designation of the property, where if they purchased property or received a donation of property, that it was already designated as state natural area. This is just a slide that shows you the percentages of the different types of whether it's registered or dedicated or passively included, which includes a lot of other similarly managed properties that were not formally nominated through this process. A map across Oregon showing you those that are broken out by those three different designations, whether they're active or passive or registered versus dedicated. So when you look at this list, if you notice the third item down, Bald Hill, City of Corvallis, that will have a direct relationship or nexus with the property that I'm about to talk about. So keep that one in mind if you would. And this little list here too, it's just an excerpt of the list, but it does help you see who some of the other owners of properties that have the designation, including us, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, federal agencies. I see BLM on there, City of Corvallis, some other federal agencies, and even private entities. I already talked about that.
Chris, can I ask while
Yes,
you're
sir.
doing this? Why would a private landowner do this?
That's a very good question. And there are a number of reasons. One of them that people might automatically assume is there's a tax benefit if they can get tax deferrals by having this designation on their property. It can also help them with like pursuing grants or funding to help do restoration work on their property. And I think that that's reasonable for people to think that that is a motive. But just in my talks with Noel, I think it's more about doing the right thing, and actually, like the applicant today that I'll talk about, that they would do it no matter what, and it's to set this property aside and know that it's part of this registry. So there's multiple facets to why they might do it. That was an excellent question.
And those tax benefits, are they just at the state level or federal level? You know?
I don't. Sorry. Yeah.
Do you,
It's,
Steve?
it's property, so I assume it's
It
state.
must be state tax.
A thorough list of our natural areas the OPRD owns. And if I didn't quite say it in my introduction too, that's what I wanted to get to is that. So again, the property we're going to talk about today isn't ours. We're not looking at getting it. We're not looking at disposing of it, but we do get to have a say on how it's protected. So the commission's role, for instance, today you'll be hearing about Bald Hill, and you have the opportunity to approve or not a registration request. And then also that you would review. So again, the program's voluntary. So if a landowner applied for this and they were granted it, and then they found that it was too onerous or they couldn't meet the property conditions anymore, they can remove themselves from the program. So you would hear that once again if that happened. And that's what is referred to as de-dedication on this slide here. Staff role, I talked a bit about the ORBIC versus Oregon Parks and Recreation Department role. So ORBIC would first review the state plan and look at a request and say, oh, well, how many acres, what type of habitat is this, and is this something that we need? And then again, also managing the database, whereas we're more the boots on the ground. For instance, Noel actually went out on site, and he would have been here today, by the way, but he's down in Curry County working on a really important project. So I admit I've not visited this property firsthand, which I would love to have, but I'm gonna fake it by photos and maps and descriptions. So anyway, his role would be to go out and confirm like what the landowner is saying are the attributes of that property. Does it really have something worth protecting?
So, Chris, the back up one slide there.
Yes. Whoops.
Totally back
Technology, great.
Who let me drive?
Yeah.
One moment.
So I think I can ask this without it.
Okay.
I don't know that this is a big deal, and I'm not sure how much private ground has gone into this, but I think about the property tax implications. If this is voluntary, who's responsible if I suddenly decide I don't want my property on this anymore? I want to leave the program. Whose responsibility is it to tell the tax assessor in that county?
Oh, that's a really good question. Let me make a note and report back to you later on that. So
It's a good question.
yeah, I will literally make a note. And a lot of this is based on good faith on what the landowner is doing. But again, they're not auditing themselves either. And, we will do that, like send staff out to make sure they're still conserving the property. But that's a very good point. I mean, it'd be really easy to forget that piece at the end if you were a said landowner.
And it would dramatically snowball on a landowner.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be immense.
Let me pull up my next presentation here that's under the same item. Let me phone a friend first, Doug. That one, there you go. Beautiful, thank you. So this is the property specifically. It's called Bald Hill Farm. And the next slide, I'll show you a map to get you oriented on where it is. And if you'll recall, when I was on the earlier slide that listed properties already on the registry, there was a Bald Hill property owned by the city of Corvallis. So keep that in mind in this slide and the next. So this property is over 800 acres. It's managed by Greenbelt Land Trust, who you've heard about today. One of the points that I'll be making when we go through this presentation and at the end rather than make you read the 19-page briefing, are we still allowed to call it a brief if it's 19 pages? I would like to finish up by, there's a summary at the end that we're in just a paragraph. I can describe to you the pros and cons and what we're looking at here. So one of the points that I want to make there, though, is the Greenbelt Land Trust has field cred, if you will. They have a reputation for conservation and protecting property. So they're a reliable applicant, I guess, if you will. This lists some of the other natural area register properties that they manage: Kingston Hills, Kingston Prairie, Horseshoe Lake, and Courtney Creek. And Kingston Hills actually was a property that was added to the register last year. And I suspect that's when Noel did his introduction to you of the program at that time. This property's been managed as a natural area for 19 years and is contiguous with other natural areas. And so the more that a property has to offer, the more value it has to the program and the more worthy it is. So that's one of the other things I'll be pointing out, is the number of species and habitats that are on this property. This is the map for context. If you can see my mouse wiggling around, Corvallis is over here to the east of the property. Again, the property's red, and the property's about 800 acres. And then look down south is Philomath, just to give you a little geo reference there. And notice all of these green parcels are other state natural areas already. So notice that this will make a contiguous kind of connection with those parcels. And I'm going to remind you also that, do we really need another 800 acres right there? That this has already been vetted and determined that there's still a need for the types of habitat that we're going to be setting aside and protecting by this designation. Excuse me. An aerial photo. So this is a list of the habitats and the special species that are found on this property. And let's see here. I think there are at least 6 threatened and endangered species. There are 4 ecohabitat types that are unique to the Willamette Valley that are worthy of protecting. Those are the Oregon white oak and Douglas fir snowberry woodland, the Oregon white oak grass savanna, and the Oregon white oak, poison oak, snowberry, blue wild rye woodland, and the tufted hairgrass valley bottomland prairie with vernal pools and brush prairie, excuse me. So there are multiple types of ecoregions and types to protect there, and multiple sensitive, threatened, and endangered species on this property.
Poison oak. It's not.
Yeah.
I live in the Willamette Valley. I'm sorry. The poison oaks just jumped out at me there. Not real threatened.
I tried to whisper that part, Commissioner Berger, but you caught me there. And I did not read this out loud in front of my wife at home, because she would have said, "You're not taking that before the commission." They're not gonna automatic denial. Here's some beautiful photos of the property itself. So one of the things that I'd like to point out, if I may, if you're familiar, we're gonna, since we're on the east side anyway, think more towards Central Oregon. At the Cove Palisades, there's a piece of property there that does not have the state natural area designation, but it has a national natural heritage designation. That's the island within the Cove Palisades State Park. So if you think about that, that is a unique juniper savanna. And I can't say that it was completely untouched by mankind since European settling, but it had a very light touch. So it's about as pristine as you can get. So just to be transparent, this property has had a history of some agricultural use and has had some forestry activities, but it does not anymore. It's been managed for conservation for, again, almost the last 20 years. It doesn't mean that you won't hear a chainsaw out there if there's more conifer encroachment and trees need to be taken out. But really, it's being managed for restoration purposes. Also, I want to point out that the designation of a state natural area doesn't exclude use of a property. This particular property we're looking at here already has a trail system on it of almost 4 miles. It's under a recreation easement by the county, Benton County. So this property is accessed by the public regularly and will continue to be accessed and welcoming to the public. The other point I wanted to make on the map and somehow managed to get past that without pointing it out is that we've heard a lot of support for this application. So neighbors that use it as a park, other land managers that are managing these other state natural areas. So this is a very well-supported application. So with that, I want to read this summary from here. I know you can read, but it's short and it'll spare you from, again, reading 19 pages. The Bald Hill Farm property is considered a priority site from a habitat conservation perspective due to its size, connectivity to other protected areas, and the fact that it contains multiple endangered species and associated high-value habitat types. These habitats include significant areas of oak woodland, upland prairie, savanna, wetland prairie, and riparian, all of which have been identified as priority ecological systems by OWEB or as strategy habitats in the Oregon Conservation Strategy. Not only is Bald Hill Farm home to 6 federally listed plant and animal species, it also has enormous potential for establishing additional listed and rare species. The Greenbelt Land Trust has a formal agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Bonneville Power Administration to manage portions of the property to support Fender's blue butterfly, this critically endangered species endemic to the Willamette Valley. This work is part of the Greenbelt vision for creating a butterfly way, a 2-mile corridor that connects critical butterfly habitat across 1,400 acres of conservation lands. Bald Hill Farm's protection and restoration is vital in providing habitat and connectivity to support the future downlisting of this threatened species. Finally, its close proximity to the communities of Corvallis and Philomath makes Bald Hill Farm a popular spot for low-impact recreation and environmental education.
Wonderful.
So with that, I respectfully submit item 6A to you with a recommendation that the commission approve addition of the Bald Hill Farm property to the Register of State Natural Areas.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Any questions, any discussion on this particular piece? I know that we spoke about it about a year ago. Go ahead.
No,
Yeah. Did you?
no.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the briefing on this, and it's a pretty compelling property, and I like it and I support this. I've spent some time hiking around near the perimeter of the property, and it's a pretty cool area. It's cool to see. In our prior discussion back in September, I brought up some issues. I don't think I got my words in proper order to clarify things. It had been a long day. I don't think I'd slept well the night before, so I was rambling maybe a little. But I think there's some scientific questions that kind of lead to philosophical questions about how the state natural areas deal with places like this, where we have these habitats, these target habitats that we're talking about are really successional stages in a landscape that was being actively managed by Kalapuya people who are, by all forms of evidence we have available to us, fire managing this landscape to target certain kinds of culturally significant habitats and species. And so 170 or so years after the removal, we're seeing all these different stages of succession. And across the American West, I can think of very few places where we see as dramatic a succession in the vegetation as we have around the perimeter of the Willamette Valley. So one thing that I do like about this particular state natural area is that you're mentioning a management plan that actually has targets, that is trying to sustain certain kinds of habitat conditions. And I think that as part of our consideration of any of these potential additions to the state natural area, we need to consider the fact that these were human managed landscapes and that they would not exist except by virtue of continued human management, and that human management towards certain intended ends is important. We find with a lot of parks and protected areas, if you put a fence around it and say, we're protecting it for the following habitats and characteristics, very quickly those go away. this would become conifer forest given enough time, and it would become kind of a monoculture of conifer forest before succeeding to something else. And so we actually have to build a concept of active human management into these to make sure that we're actually protecting the things that we're setting these places aside to protect, to achieve those goals. And to some extent, that's a scientific issue, but it's also a philosophical issue relating to how we think about protected areas and natural areas. We tend in our conventional thinking in administrative context to sort of forget about the Native American presence and what it has meant for that vegetation. And to some extent, as part of the same kind of thinking that has led us to working with the Grand Ronde on Fort Yamhill, we have to kind of decolonize our own thinking about a lot of things. And one of them is that just our concepts about putting aside land, protecting land, and saying, oh, if we just put a fence around it, declare it as such, it's going to stay there forever. It's not the case. That active human management has to be part of the picture. And I know you know this, but I feel like with a lot of these future additions, we may want to be talking with them about what is your management plan to sustain that? Because what you're trying to protect here is sort of an intermediate stage between intensive fire management of 170 years ago and what this thing wants to become if we just leave it alone. And so we're trying to capture something in this sort of suspended animation on a trajectory from one thing to another and say, no, that's what we want right there, that moment in time. And nature doesn't do that. So I'm happy to see the management plan as part of this picture. I did enjoy hearing maybe just a little bit more, just a tiny bit more, because I know we don't want to go on for very much longer on this, but I'd be interested in hearing if there are other, there's the management for butterfly, but are they bringing in fire management? Is active fire management part of this picture? Are there other things that are going to help sustain these habitats of interest in this location so that 30 years from now, they're still there and they haven't succeeded to some other stage of the vegetation that's totally different?
While I buy myself a moment of time here.
Yeah. Yeah, just a brief response, but I think I'm raising it as a general issue, but it's of interest in this particular case because, as I say, the edge of the Willamette Valley is maybe the most dramatic example I can think of in the American West, where we see vegetation going from one very intensively managed thing, traditionally by Native people, to something else if humans don't intervene to maintain those kinds of habitats over time.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly glance, I'm not catching it, but I thought that I had seen something in their proposal about fire. But so I'll add that to my notes of things to look into. But I think your point is well taken, and I'll make sure that like through Knoll and how we interact with the Greenbelt Land Trust on this property, it will ensure that we use that lens to look at this property. But also I think that more importantly, with our review of the overall statewide natural area plan that we're going to be opening up next year, that maybe we can make sure, and I might capitalize on your interest and see if you would be willing to throw an eye on it and if we're addressing that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And the tribes of the region are working on this very actively as well. The Grand Ronde, Siletz, others as well, are looking at these questions of how to traditionally manage landscapes to sustain culturally preferred habitats and species. And in many ways, they're the same culturally significant habitats and species that we're interested in within the Natural Heritage Program. We want to see those too. But that all parties are beginning to realize how much those were sort of a snapshot in time in a very rapidly changing landscape. I mean, climate change and everything else is causing a lot of change, but especially in these places where a very intensive form of traditional management used to exist, when we try to capture something through the State Natural Area Program, we're kind of capturing a snapshot in time in a succession. And so the management questions of how we keep that going are important. They're important from a natural resource standpoint, but they're also important from a cultural standpoint. And I think that that's something that the tribes are going to keep bringing forward to us as well over time. So it's good to be thinking about that, I think, as we try to, because I do think as virtuous as the Natural Area Program has been, the program was founded in a time where people didn't think about those issues. And they really were thinking that these are sort of static landscapes, that the vegetation communities stay where they are. And the truth is they're really in active motion. And the Willamette Valley is probably the most dramatic example around. So this is just a good reminder of that, that, if we're going to sustain those things, that's great, but we also want to manage for them in a way that sort of, in a way, mimics traditional management or something to accomplish that. If we're going to keep those, if we're going to preserve the things we actually say we're preserving.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Dewar. I think we have one more comment before we're going to take a vote on this.
Okay. So just to emphasize what Commissioner Georgia said yesterday at Cam Wah Chung, we saw a 1909 picture of this hillside without one juniper tree.
Yeah.
And today it's probably 70% covered. So the management plans, everything.
Exactly, yeah. Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, let's go ahead and move to a vote on this unless there's any further.
need a motion.
I do need a motion, yes.
Okay, and the motion would be to register this property on our registry, the Bald Hill registry, under the registry of
State natural areas.
state natural areas.
Yeah.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Dewar. All those in favor of adding this to the register of state natural areas, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Hearing none. So moved, passes. Awesome.
Thank you, Chair Hill and Commission. Also, I wanted to say I did make notes of Commissioner Dewar's comments and
Wonderful.
Commissioner Grasky's comments and questions, and consider that homework that I will follow up on. And want to reiterate my offer to, if you'd like to have more of a thorough presentation on state natural area program overall, we can set that up, or would like that presentation set to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the time you put into that. All right, we're gonna try to push through for a couple more agenda items before we take a break. And so Chris, are you doing this one?
I'll introduce Caleb.
Okay.
And then turn it over to him. So Chair Hill, Director Assumption, Vice Chair Berger, members of the commission, Chris Havel, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. Here on agenda item, and I just blanked, is it 6B?
6B.
Yeah. Great. This is on the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, which is one of those statewide projects that we manage on behalf of the state of Oregon. It transcends the state park system and deals with recreation across the state, regardless of jurisdiction. As you can see from the date, it lasts 5 years. I'm going to turn it over to Caleb Dixon, our marketing research analyst, who's been working to lead this project quite ably in conjunction with Oregon State University. We would normally bring this to you for adoption in a regular meeting. This is the subject of the special meeting that we're scheduling. Looks like the date's shaping up to be July 30th. I'll confirm that for you next week. So today is a teaser to give you a preview of the major issues that are emerging through the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plans research project. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caleb for him to share his screen and move forward. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for having me, Commission. As mentioned, we're going to give a little bit of a overview of the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, which we refer to as SCORP because it's a bit of a mouthful to say the whole name. And I'll give a little background here on the purpose of the plan. And it's the main function is that the plan qualifies the state of Oregon to participate in the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund program. And specifically, the SCORP guides this grant program by identifying priority needs with respect to outdoor recreation in the state, which are then incorporated into the grant criteria. Now, going beyond the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the SCORP is also used in other OPRD administered grant programs. And it's just generally a great resource for any outdoor recreation planning efforts throughout the state at any level of government, and also for any private sector planning efforts as well. Now, the plan has a number of requirements, which hopefully I will touch on a little bit today. And those requirements are the plan needs to identify statewide outdoor recreation issues, needs to evaluate both the supply and demand of outdoor recreation resources and facilities in the state, and it needs to be developed with ample public involvement. And as Chris mentioned, it's updated every 5 years. Now, the plan that we're working on right now is titled Balance and Engagement, Sustaining the Benefits for All Oregonians. And this title really encapsulates the themes of this plan, which is that outdoor recreation is important to Oregonians and provides many benefits. And we want to ensure that all residents can engage with outdoor recreation in a balanced way, thereby sustaining those benefits in the long term. And there's two really core pillars that we build the SCORP off of, and that is the identification of outdoor recreation participation in Oregon and outdoor recreation needs in Oregon. And before I move on, I will touch on a little bit here about how we put this plan together in terms of the staff. As Chris mentioned, so there's OPRD staff. We've had also a lot of great contributions throughout the agency. And then we have a contract with Oregon State University's Center for the Outdoor Recreation Economy for a number of components of the plan. And then for one component of the plan, we also had a contract with an organization called Earth Economics. Now, one of the most important parts of every SCORP is a resident survey that we put together. And you can think of this as really our demand evaluation, going back to those plan requirements. And so we conducted a representative statewide survey with over 3,000 respondents. And this was at the end of 2022. So it represents folks' participation in the calendar year 2022. And we asked residents about their outdoor recreation participation in 76 specific activities. And then we also asked about outdoor recreation needs, constraints to outdoor recreation, and opinions on parks and recreation management. Now, turning to the supply side evaluation, we also conducted a survey of outdoor recreation providers, and we actually had 178 respondents for this survey. And so we can think of this as, basically park managers at all levels of outdoor recreation, jurisdictions. And so we think of it in some ways too as close to home settings. So those within urban growth boundaries, like your local parks and recreation agencies, as well as those in more dispersed remote settings, such as some of the federal land managers in the state. And for the providers, we asked about funding challenges, as well as, or I should say funding priorities, as well as management challenges. And so those are two big aspects of the public involvement that's required in SCORP. But we have some additional avenues as well. We have an advisory committee with about 30 members representing all sorts of outdoor recreation interests throughout the state. And we met with them multiple times. They reviewed materials, provided guidance throughout the effort. A few months ago, we had 3 public open house events where we presented a brief overview of the plan and spoke with interested folks from the public and took their questions and comments. And currently, all of our planning documents are available to the public for comment as well, and that's for the next month or so. Now, a really important, or I should say, some of the really important components of this plan, as I mentioned, are understanding and quantifying the benefits of outdoor recreation participation. We had 3 studies that looked at that. The first is looking at the health benefits of outdoor recreation. So this is part of our OSU contract. And it was estimated that from outdoor recreation participation, the cost of illness savings in Oregon is about $3 billion per year. We also have a study looking at the economic benefits accrued to the participants. So this is kind of, if you add it up, what is the value for your own participation throughout the year? And then we add it up across the entire population. Our estimate is $57 billion per year. And so these 2 pieces are the benefits that go to participants for their own participation. But we also know that as people travel around the state and they go to different communities, they're spending money, they're benefiting the economy. And so we had an Earth Economics study done to look at what is the amount of spending that outdoor recreation is supporting in the state. And it's estimated at $21.2 billion. And again, a big reason we focus on the benefits of outdoor recreation is to illustrate its importance, and also the importance of sustaining it and making sure that we enable everybody in the state to be able to access it. And that's where we turn to our statewide issues. And so the first issue is engaging with underserved communities. And before I go on, when we meet again, I'll have a lot more detail about these issues to present to you. So this is like a very brief overview. But essentially, in our participation data from our surveys, we've identified that a number of demographic groups are underserved in terms of their total outdoor recreation participation. Specifically, in this report, we look at low-income Oregon residents, residents in a household with a disability, and racially and ethnically diverse residents. And because we asked about constraints in the survey, what we put together are a list of recommendations that are meant to address the unique economic, social, and accessibility related constraints that we theorize are causing the participation gaps that we see in the data. And ultimately, the goal is to make sure that all communities have the opportunity to enjoy those benefits that we just talked about from outdoor recreation. And the next statewide issue is related to, okay, how do we sustain those benefits? As I'm sure a lot of you have heard, there's a lot more reports about overcrowding, congestion in outdoor areas, natural resource impacts. And so we asked residents and providers in those surveys about crowding, natural resource impacts, and management techniques to address these issues. And the benefit of asking both residents and providers is that we can kind of cross-reference those responses to hopefully find ways that we can manage visitation levels, provide information on crowding and natural resource impacts, and adapt current infrastructure that we can balance allowing for outdoor recreation and the benefits while also conserving these places that we love and the lands that support the outdoor recreation. And the last component that I'll talk about today is the open project selection process. So this is kind of where we take all the work, all the research we do in SCORP, and we now bring it all the way back to the purpose, which is related to that Land and Water Conservation Fund program. And so the open project selection process is the objective criteria for grant selection that is based on the priority needs that are identified in SCORP. And this is, again, where we connect all of the SCORP work into the actual distribution of those grants to make sure that we're meeting the needs of Oregonians and, you know, really being clear here that this criteria is really very directly tied to the information that we received through the surveys of Oregon residents and recreation providers. Now, the next steps in our process. So as I mentioned, the plan is still available for public review. We're accepting comments until June 28th. Then we are going to, you know, if we need to make any revisions, we will, and bring the final draft to the commission this summer with a more detailed presentation and a request for approval to then take it to the final steps of review and adoption by the National Park Service. In our current timeline, it looks like we will hopefully have adoption by the beginning of 2025, which would make the SCORP, I guess, our eligibility for Land and Water Conservation Fund through the end of 2029, all the way to the end of the decade, as crazy as that seems. And that's where we are right now. I have my email on here if you do have any questions, but I'm also happy to, of course, take questions right now.
Thank you, Caleb. Appreciate all your work on this.
So Caleb, Chris, prior to that July meeting, will we be able to send out the draft to the commissioners so they can review it and do the homework? So it's not all, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. All right, moving on. We are now on. Can we get heritage done first and then do lunch, or what do you think?
You can actually just say heritage, Chris, or Matt, you don't even have to pull up the brief if you just want
That was a good idea. Yep.
to say your 2 sentences while he's
So we'll
getting
just
that.
get
We'll grab
lunch done,
lunch.
and we'll grab some lunch, take a break for some lunch.
I just, it's like tater tots and saying
Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, for the record, Matt Rippey with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. And before I jump into the brief, I do have one quick note, thanks to Chris. Commissioner Grasty, on your question about Fort Yamhill and when that property was purchased. 2 acres were purchased in 1931 and the rest in 2004. So I just wanted to close the gap on that one. With regards to agenda item 7A, an informational item, Heritage Division update. Just a couple of quick notes on that. In April was the Oregon Heritage Conference, which was a success, and I can truly attest to that because I was able to go to the conference. I would recommend in the future, if you have the opportunity to go, it's a very, very cool conference. There were some pretty powerful speakers that you can read about there in the brief. They had about 270 participants. It was the first in-person conference since 2018 because of the pandemic. They'd taken a couple of sessions off. The next one will be in 2026. And then the other item from Heritage Division that I wanted to mention, and Ian Johnson yesterday kind of pointed out, is that there's been a lot of new staff within SHPO and within the Heritage Division. It's taking a little bit of time to get folks up to speed, but I have to say, having kind of begun working with that group, they've got an incredible staff. They're really committed to the work that they do, and it's been kind of a privilege and an honor for me to be able to work with that team. And even as these new folks are coming on, they're so well versed and so passionate about what they do. It's a really cool team to work with. Are there any questions on agenda item 7A?
Any comments? No?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Matt. So let's go ahead and take a break. Let's see. You want to do 15 or 20 minutes? 15, okay? Yeah, let's do 15 minutes. So we'll reconvene at 12:25. Is that right? Yeah, that's right.
Crazy, random. It is really cool though, to like, now everything's, I don't know, but it's kind of cool. The amount of, yeah, like I'm a carrier for Pendrive syndrome, which is like, so Matt got his stuff too, and he's not a carrier, so our kids. And it's one of those. Yeah, you both have to carry it, but they're coming up with all new. It doesn't test all the genes that, or they don't have all the marker genes for every because my daughter did. Oh, yeah, that's right. Whatever you want. It's just right on your home screen. You can do ancestry reports, DNA reports. Yes. Also, so I have a variant for.
If you're still eating and drinking, totally fine. What, somebody just yell at me?
You're good.
Okay.
And speakers are muted.
All right,
Online couldn't
so
hear you.
we are now on the Park Development Division, which all of these are action items for contracts that exceed $750,000. So we're gonna try to go through them quickly. I think most people, all of us have read the briefs. So if you do have questions, please raise your hand, chime in as they come up, but I know a lot of folks have long drives home tonight, so we want to not waste a lot of time going through everything. So with that, I turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission. For the record, Matt Rippey with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. I'm here today with action item 8A, which is request for approval of a construction contract for the replacement of a shower restroom building at Sunset Bay State Park in the amount of a not to exceed $1.35 million.
Great. Any questions on this? Does anybody want any more information? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion since I don't have a mouthful.
I have a motion from Commissioner Berger. Do I hear a second? Commissioner Grasty? All right, all those in favor of, let me actually read exactly what we're approving. Approving this contract for Sunset Bay restroom shower construction, not to exceed $1.35 million, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 8B, North Gateway Campground Design Contract Amendment.
Good afternoon, Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission. My name is Jason Brady, and I am a construction project manager for Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. Today, I'm bringing forward agenda item 8B, North Gateway Campground Design Contract Amendment. For some of you not familiar with the North Gateway Campground name, It is the campground that we're designing and going to construct in the northern part of Silver Falls, part of the Go Bond project up there. Back in November of 2022, the commission approved the design contract, which took our ideas and enabled us to take the ideas, put them on paper, and work with our design consultant with the programming, schematic design through construction documents. And we are about 60% of the way through that process right now. So it's time to look forward to the second half of this project, which is construction. So this amendment would enable us to work with our design consultants through the bid process, through construction, as an advocate for quality assurance students during that portion of the project. The second part of this is to incorporate our design consultant who designed our standard prototype restrooms. Those were designed those designs were completed after this contract was executed. So I'd like to bring them in as part of our team again to be advocates for us during that construction process, but also to do this different site aspects, the different site design aspects that need to take place from that prototype to integrate into our campground design. The third element of this amendment is the landscape design services and modifying the parking lot design that we have for the visitor center. That was out of scope of our current contract. We'd like to bring that in scope, tie this all into one project. So it's going to take everything east of 214, right across the road from the new day use area and the new North Falls trail there, and just get everything set up on the east side of that, complete that. So with your approval, I'd like to take our current contract not to exceed value of $954,000 to the new not to exceed of $1.85 million, and that should conclude what we need for the design portion of this project. Any questions? I'd like to entertain those at this time.
Anybody have any questions? On this one? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Berger.
Can somebody explain to me why important elements like vehicle and bicycle parking and outdoor landscape wasn't in the original contract? Why didn't we think to do that at the time?
Good question. For the visitor center, that is its own project, and that was going to be part of that visitor center portion. The project manager is going to now work on just the inside and focus mainly on the building. And since we're going to be doing construction nearby, we just thought we would include that all into this one contract. So that was out for the current.
That was really hard to understand. Can somebody who I can understand explain it?
Jason, it's just because you're kind of breaking up a little bit. We can't understand you very clearly, so that's why it's not. But Matt,
you're explaining, but I'm not able to hear you.
Sorry about that.
Projects to another project after they change the scope on another project that takes some elements out. And so they move those elements over to this project.
Okay,
to
so
make it
nobody
one
just forgot
project.
that we needed bicycle and car parking.
No.
Chris, can you say that into a mic?
Chair Hill, whoops. Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, Chris Havel, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. What I understood Jason to be saying was the elements that are now in this new project were in a previous project, but the scope of that other project was changed to allow them to focus on the the interior of the building. So they took everything that was outside the building and moved it over to another project. So it's like, you can't take the money with it. So their new approval here is because they eliminated it from a previous project and put it into this one. Jason, if I got any of that wrong, laugh and then correct me.
That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that explanation.
So I'll make the motion to approve to amend the design contract not to exceed 1.750 million.
We have a motion from Commissioner Grasty. Do I have a second?
I'm sorry.
I think it's actually 185. Sorry.
This is 1.850.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
The
it's
new,
1850.
there was an amended one that is 1.850.
That would be my motion.
Second. We have a second from Commissioner Izumi. All right, all those in favor of approving this amended design contract not to exceed $1,850,000, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes. All right, moving on.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. To agenda item 8C, shampoo assessment and A&E contract amendment.
Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, for the record, Matt Rippey with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. Here today with action item 8C, which is assessment and design contract for Shampooey State Heritage Area in relation to the expansion of the campground. This project is going to focus on all the design elements for the campground, but also the assessments around archaeological work, soil and wetland mitigation, as well as others. The request is for a contract not to exceed $1 million.
All right, any comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a motion.
So moved. I don't want to make them all.
Thank you again.
Why are my numbers off? Do I have the wrong page?
There's not.
There were two, Commissioner Grassi, there were two briefs that numbers came in a little bit later than when we initially submitted our briefs. This one and the last one. I think this one originally maybe in your packet has $900,000. We got final numbers back at $1 million. And so that was the change to the request there.
Okay, thanks.
But none of the briefing
The
material
scope,
changed.
yeah, there's no changes in scope. It was just, we got final numbers back from the consultants.
Do we still need a second?
Sorry about that.
We do need a second.
I will second.
Thank you, Commissioner Dewar. All right, all those in favor of approving to spend up to $1 million for the Shampooey assessment and A&E contract, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing none, motion passes. All right, moving on to 8D, Otter Crest Gift Shop Construction Contract.
Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, for the record, Matt Rippey with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. Here today seeking approval on item 8D, which is restoration construction contract for the Otter Crest Gift Shop. And this is going to provide exterior restoration and stabilization as well as interior work, including some accessibility needs for the facility. The request is for the restoration construction contract not to exceed $1.3 million.
Any comments, questions? We're all good? Everybody's good? Okay.
Move approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Dewar. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm gonna go with Commissioner Cribbins on that one. All those in favor of approving this construction contract for Otter Crest Gift Shop, not to exceed $1.3 million, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Hearing none, the motion passes.
If you've never been there, it is like
It
the
looks super
favorite
cool.
restroom.
Just like Go Bonds, we are going. On to number 8E. This is for the Yaquina Bay Lighthouse construction contract. Matt?
Thank you, Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, for the record, Matt Rippey with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. Here today seeking approval for action item 8E, which is a restoration construction contract for the Yaquina Bay Lighthouse in the amount of not to exceed $1.4 million. And similar to the Otter Crest request, this is a stabilization of the facility. This is the only lighthouse actually that OPRD owns. The rest we lease through different federal agencies.
I move approval.
I have a motion from Commissioner Dewar to approve this. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Azumi with the second. Seeing no comments or questions, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving this award as a construction contract not to exceed $1.4 million for Yaquina Bay Lighthouse, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing none, the motion passes. Now we are at 8F, Hughes House Construction Contract.
Chair Hill, Director Sumption, members of the commission, for the record, Matt Rippey with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, here today seeking approval on action item 8F, which is a restoration construction contract for the Hughes House. This request is for the amount not to exceed $1 million and will include exterior restoration as well as a new roof for the building.
Move
Comments?
for approval.
Okay, we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Grasty. Do I have a second?
Second.
From Commissioner Cribbins with the second. So we are voting now on approval to award a construction contract not to exceed $1 million for the Hughes House construction. Involves exterior and roofing for this historic building. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing none, motion passes.
It's long enough, Shipsy, that we're repainting it and you and I have still here.
You're not putting a plaque on it.
Right,
Oh,
moving.
it's in there.
Our last one under this Park Development Division is 8G, Nahalem Bay Utility Project Construction Contract.
Chair Hill, Director Sumption, members of the commission, for the record, Matt Rippey with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, here today seeking approval for action item 8G, which is part of the Go Bond projects at Nahalem Bay State Park. This is a construction contract request not to exceed $9 million and includes, it's a very extensive project, includes utility and water main improvements across the whole campground, addition of a new restroom, sewer improvements, as well as some accessible sites and host sites throughout the campground.
Any comments, questions? Go ahead, Commissioner
Comment,
Berger.
I'm really excited about this project.
Me too.
I,
Thank you.
more coastal places
Mhm.
that are up to speed are wonderful. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dewar.
Small technical thing. Has Stacy Scott and that part of our team already completed all the archaeological clearances on this?
You know, I'm not sure if she's completed everything, but she is the one, being the coastal region archaeologist, she's the one that's very involved with this project.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly where they're at in terms of the cultural clearance.
Okay.
And what kind of monitoring is gonna take place, but I take a lot of comfort in the fact that she's the one overseeing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks.
Any other comments, questions, Commissioner Grasty?
A little flippant one, will this survive the 9.0 or not?
You want him to speculate?
I'll tell you, we'll get together
It'll
after.
be up to state standards.
If not, Matt, he's gonna come find you.
Exactly.
Going away.
All right,
Yeah.
any further comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion on this one.
Move approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Berger. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Dewar. All those in favor of approval of construction contract not to exceed $9 million for the Nahalem Bay Utility Project, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing none, so approved.
Thank you
Go
very
forth,
much.
Bill.
Thank you.
And Matt's equally excited. He managed that one.
So we are moving right along. Now we're on to number 9 rulemaking with, we're starting with 9A, a request to open Division 56, Oregon Main Street program.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that.
You're just.
Okay. Oh,
That's-
Director,
Gotta make sure I get it right.
Commissioner, Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, Katie Guthier with Oregon Parks and Recreation Department here on agenda item 9A. And with me online is Sherry Stewart, who's our Main Street coordinator, Main Street program coordinator within the Heritage Division. So we are here requesting permission to open rulemaking on the Main Street program. Sherry is here to answer any technical questions on the program, and I will give you a background on the reasons we're going to request to open rulemaking. The Main Street program is a economic revitalization program. OPRD works with the Main Street America as a statewide coordinating program. There currently are rules for the Main Street Revitalization Grant Program, but not for the overall program that works with Main Street communities. So we're asking to create rules that will include parameters for participation in the Main Street network, describe how resources are provided for participating organizations, and establish a structure for the management of the program to help our participants understand what it means to participate in this program. And we will work with DOJ on the details of those rules. We included some draft rules in the packet. They will change likely somewhat. Instead of doing a rule advisory committee, there is a Main Street network that includes all of the participants, or includes a subset of participants from the program that meet on a quarterly basis. And they're meeting in July. So we will take the draft rules to that group to have them look at them and review and provide comments before we open public comment, and revise the draft before opening public comment. Are there any questions on this proposal?
This, it seemed to me when I read through it, looks like our success is catching up with our rules. This has become a very popular thing, and we need to be a little more vigorous in explaining it, and that's a good thing. I thought rule advisory committees were required.
For our agency, they're not required. We have to explain why we're not doing it if we don't do one, and we can easily explain that this group exists and we're going to a existing group to seek feedback.
And public comment will be.
Yeah, and we'll do public comment and all of those processes that are required. But instead of creating another group, we're going to a group that already exists.
Thanks.
Sherry, did you have anything to add?
Thanks, Katie. No, I think you covered it. I think it's just codifying sort of how we've already been existing and just giving a little bit more structure and putting into rules how we function and operate and how we work with and designate programs.
And the way I read this, it's once you're already in the Main Street program, how the Main Street program operates, not necessarily how you get into the Main Street program. Is that correct?
There are parameters within the Main Street network for how you participate in the program. So we follow the Main Street network process. Is that correct, Sherry?
Yes, we do have an application process, and that's clearly specified on our website. And then once you are part of our network, then these are the requirements depending on what tier level you're at in our network. So what some of those participation requirements are, and then some of the benefits are listed on our website as well.
I have heard from some communities in Oregon that it is very hard to get into this. It's hard because they don't have staffing necessarily to get and maintain in this program. So as we, and frankly, these are the communities that probably benefit the most from this program. And so, you know, as we do think through these rules, and obviously we'll get public comments, and I will encourage some of these folks who've reached out about this program to also make comments, but think about how to kind of lower that bar to get them into the program and support them from maybe the beginning, and once they get the hang of it, it'll be better, but there are
I'll
some
second
communities I've
that.
heard of that have to get like rare, these rare folks and other folks to actually manage this program for them. And that I don't think is necessarily the intention, but can be arduous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I give you
heard
a
the same
second.
thing.
I agree. Thanks.
If I might clarify that, we actually do have the connected communities level, and there's very low participation requirement at that level. There's no staffing requirement. There's no requirement to even have an independent nonprofit at the connected communities level. It just has to be a group of people that care about their downtown. And so they can apply to be the participant. We have about 50 communities that are participating, so it might be more a marketing issue if people are having those. We don't require staffing at that level. The only thing that they're required to do is attend one of our trainings once every 2 years, submit an annual report, and have a point of contact.
That's helpful feedback.
And just wherever you have those communities, Sherry is fantastic, the whole team, but they're fantastic about reaching out, connecting, explaining what you need to do. Like I can't say enough good things about how they'll approach this. So if you have specific communities that you're concerned with, please feel free to tap them to Sherry.
Any other questions or comments on the actual, what we're going to vote on? All right, I will entertain a motion then.
I move that we have approval to open rulemaking to add to and amend OAR 736-056-002, 756-056-020 to include the Oregon Main Street program into rule.
I have a second from Commissioner Grasty.
Enough, I could read it.
All right, without further comment or questions, all those in favor of opening rulemaking, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Hearing none. So passes. All right.
This one.
Now we are on to agenda item 9B, request to open Division 15, which is talking about rates.
Woohoo.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good. So Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, Katie Gauthier here with agenda item 9B, request to open rulemaking on rate ranges. We'd start with some background. ORS 390.1242 allows the commission to adopt rate ranges. This was a result of House Bill 2318 in 2017 that allowed the agency to establish flexible fees. It was implemented first in 2018. We adopted the first set of rate ranges. It allows the director then from those rate ranges to adjust fees up to 4 times per year, and we track that within the agency. Those first rate ranges, we anticipated that they would be good for about 3 biennium, and we're now reaching that 3rd biennium. They were implemented in the 2019-2021 budget, and we're now reaching the end of their life cycle. And many of them are still good. We haven't reached the top of all of those ranges, but some of them were initially very small, and in some areas we are reaching close to the top of the rate range. So we have had an internal work group look at what types of rate ranges we should consider, and are proposing to increase the ranges generally about 30% at the top end of the range. So the bottom end would start at our current rate and the top end would go 30%. And that's really a reflection of current and anticipated increases in inflation and utilities, and with the thought that this would go another 3 biennium. So I'm going to go through each of the rates by site type, and there are a couple of areas where we're either requesting higher than the 30% or lower for some specific areas, and then some areas where we have new site types. So I will call those out as we go through, and feel free to ask questions as we go through this, and I'll see what I can do, and have a lot of experts in the room. On this chart, you'll also note the asterisks are where we charge a 25% surcharge for non-residents. So those are considered our RV sites, the full hookup or the electric hookups. And throughout, you'll see a couple of areas where we have a 25% surcharge. So the first column is our current rate. The second column is the current range. The current range is what's in rural. The current rate is what we're actually charging. And this is out before taxes. So the lodging taxes will vary based on which county. So in certain parks, it'll be a different rate, but this is the current rate we're charging. And then the proposed range, the bottom range, and then the top of the range.
So if there's a transit road tax, it's included in that current rate?
No, it's
on top.
in addition. And we round to the nearest dollar. We round up to the nearest dollar. But it varies by county, so we don't include it. So the primitive campsite, we initially made that a very narrow range. So that one does have a higher than 30% top range. And then rustic yurts, we're recommending a lower than 30% there to differentiate eventually the rustic yurt from the rustic cabin. Currently, the rates are the exact same, but our staff felt that the amenities were less in a rustic yurt than they were with a rustic cabin. So we wanted to see some price differentiation there over time. And then we have a new site type for a mini cabin. We have a current pilot project, so we are currently charging for those at a rustic cabin rate. The mini cabin has microwave. We've had a lot of debates about the rates for these. It has a microwave and a refrigerator, but only 4 people can stay in those, and that's pretty tight if you had 4 people. So there is fewer occupancy, but a bit more amenities. So we priced it between the rustic and the deluxe. And then further campsites, we move on to our horse sites, which require a pack animal. And up here on the top, noting for hiker, boater, and bicycle, it's per camper. And then group tent and group RV, we only have one place that has group RV, that's at Shampooey, and the top rate is higher here because there's a building that comes in that campsite. So there's a feeling that that one could actually be increased at a higher rate. Onto group facilities. Currently, we have a group picnic rental rate, but we would like to have a second designation for a picnic shelter rate that would be different for picnic shelters that have utilities with water and electricity. So people could rent either one that doesn't or one that does, and we'd have a different rate for those. We would take out the youth camp because we no longer reserve that one on the reservation system. It's through land leases, so it doesn't need to be in rural. And then the pavilion was currently in rural, but the only place that it exists is at Shampooey. And it is currently 2 different rentals. It's an indoor memorial building and an outdoor pavilion area that were rented separately, but rented together. So instead of having them as 2 different places, we would put them together in one. And so that's where you see an increase in the range there. But it's reflective of 2 different spaces that really are rented together. And then we move to Shore Acres, which is confusing, but really we're simplifying it. Currently, the 4 packages are the way that Shore Acres is rented out. Oh, sorry. Shore Acres is currently rented out in packages, and you need to rent multiple site types. And our existing rules were confusing in how you rented them. So instead of describing each location, we would describe it by packages and explain the different site types, or different building types. So package 1, you would include a garden site, a garden house, and a pavilion. Package 2 is a garden house and a pavilion area, and so on. And the current rates are noted here, and then we would propose increasing those by $50 currently, and then moving up from there.
Is this for a full day?
Does anybody in the back know? It's per event. So it's the length of the event.
Could be a half day, could be a wedding,
Yeah.
could be a reunion, could be a
weddings. So that's
Yeah, it's per event, but I don't know if anybody. I can get back to you on that. I'll make sure we know before we do adoption of how long the event rentals are.
Yeah, I'm curious. Because anytime you rent another, I mean, it's usually weddings for the youth.
Mhm.
And anytime you rent a wedding venue, it's usually like half day, full day. You want in early, we just charge even extra for that, so.
Yeah, I will find that out before we move forward with anything. So now we're moving on to amenities. Currently, we do not have rate ranges for our amenities, but we are proposing adding them. The first amenity is extra vehicles in campsites. Right now, we charge $7. We're proposing adding, making that fee $10 and making a range from $10 to $15. And that would be the same rate for motorcycles, but you can have 2 motorcycles for one fee. And then boat moorages are currently $10 per day per boat, and those are only at facilities that you are also renting a campsite. And we would raise that to $15 to start with, and then have a rate range. And we would add a new site type for marina slip rentals. We have one management unit that has a marina without a campsite. So at Lowell, they rent marina slips by the month, and there are no campgrounds associated with it. So instead of putting a specific amount, we would like it to be variable, because the site types vary by length and width, and the differentiation between how long you're renting it. And it really needs to be a unique agreement between the park and the boat owner. And then finally, showers. Not all of our parks offer showers to non-campers, but for those that do, we currently charge $2 per person, and we would like to increase that to $5 with a range of $5 to $10. And then now we're going to move on to day use parking permit fees. The purpose of the day use parking permit fee, as described in rule, is to manage use of parks. And currently we list 26 parks in rule where a fee is charged, but would propose eliminating the specific list of parks in rule and replacing it with a series of criteria that the agency will use to determine where parking permit fees are charged. This would allow for a more dynamic, adaptive management policy that will better allow for management of parks and more adaptive management of day use parking permit fees. So the criteria that we would propose would look at visitation and the impact of visitation on the park and the capacity of the facilities within the park, management considerations, so park use trends and visitor behavior, location, the impact of establishing a day use parking permit fee on access to outdoor recreation in the surrounding area, amenities, which would be the type of facilities and amenities in the park, considering historic context, whether the park has had a fee in the past, and then information would be posted on our website, and there would be a 30-day notice, which is similar to our hunting rules. But this the thought would allow for a more dynamic management and make it a better tool for managing park use. So, the process that we would propose, if you decide to open rules now, we would have public comment open for at least 2 months and have in-person and virtual hearings in July and August, and then come back to you either September or November with a recommendation for adopting rule changes. And then the new rate ranges would be included in the 25-27 budget proposal. And so they wouldn't go into effect immediately, but as part of the budget recommendation. Are there questions?
Commissioner Berger.
We had a little bit of a discussion yesterday about out-of-state charges, and I noted that we added a surcharge without changing rule. Did we not?
That was statutorily directed.
But, okay, so that was because
So
and it's still in play?
Well, we did it during the pandemic to try to deter folks, and then we removed it, and the legislative body said, no, we want it. And so it's in statute now for the RV.
For the RV.
And it is in our rule as well.
Yes, yeah. So any changes that we made to that would have to either be in rule or come from other statutory provisions that were made in future legislative agendas. In other words, if they came along next session and said, you know what, you're going to charge out of state
40%.
X more or whatever, we would have to do that.
Open rules.
Well, we would do it without opening rules because we didn't open rules to do the 25%. Is that correct? I mean, I'm asking a process problem here. Where are we in this?
I think we did open rules. They passed it in the legislature, and then we opened rules as part of the implementation to include it in our rules before it actually went into effect. But yes, if they were to tell us, if they were to direct us, then we would do that. We would probably still put it in our rules so that people could find it easier. I mean, looking at our attorney, but I would assume that we would still put it in there.
I guess what I'm fine with opening rule making. I mean, the proposal here is I'm all in. Okay, let's talk, and I don't think these are unreasonable. The ranges that we're giving, and hallelujah to how hard we fought to get this range
Oh my
system.
gosh, who knew?
Because it was that we had to go to the legislature for every dime of, change in this. For those that are new, remember that. That was fun. I guess the out-of-state thing is still sort of hovering around there. And if we lock in these rules, what would that look like if we wanted to do anything about that? And I don't think we have an answer to that, but I'd like to put that out there.
Yeah, I think that follows that question, and maybe other commissioners who've been on this panel longer would know the answer, but why can't we attach or think through out of state for non-RV campers? Is there a process that we don't have a hook? I know that it's not as easy as RV, but I mean, we're losing out on a lot of revenue that we could potentially bring in for those out of state campers that maybe don't have an RV.
So when we did this, the conversation here was more around, we did it to deter people. We know people come, and we didn't want it to, the old Oregon was like, come visit, now leave, don't come back, right? Like we know they're part of our local economic tourism and economy. So we were the ones at this level pushing, saying, let's leave it for the RV because Oregon RV registrations already pay their way. So it seemed like inequitable. We can certainly open a conversation to say, because at JR, where were you just at? Was it Idaho? Idaho charges 50%. It's double the rate for out of state, but people hate it. And it's really bad for staff because when visitors, I mean, it's just this interaction of you hate us, you don't want us here. So it's the line, right? Like how far do you want to go with that? But we can certainly talk about it. It is challenging to enforce. Camping is easier. Day use, I mean, I think about like Hawaii, you pull in that parking lot, almost every plate is Idaho. And we'd have to be, it would just be an enforcement thing without a lot of technology or.
Well, the request before us, I certainly approve of. But I think I would like to put it to staff to think a little deeper about. I know there are challenges. Which ones can we get somewhere? I mean, I'm not saying the whole plate needs to be, I mean, I'm not charging a Idaho guy to cost more to take a shower.
Well, maybe.
But, you know, we're not gonna go in there and when he's in the shower and say, now, where did you grow up?
Where's your license?
What are your bona fides as far as, but there might be some that we could look at and I don't want to hold up this process for that. I certainly want to move forward with this process in the timeline that we're talking about because I think the need is immediate.
So what if we just did an amendment to talk about out of state? Most of the folks, even when it went away and it came back, there wasn't a lot. Maybe it's because only 20%, but there was not a lot of pushback.
Well,
we're like, you're still cheaper than Idaho. You're still cheaper than Washington. You're way cheaper than California.
Well, what I hear is the Oregonians who can't get into their park and every other place is taken by somebody who doesn't live in Oregon.
Yeah.
And that's the voice that I kind of hear is how come, you know, I have to go to California and pay more, but they come here and they're taking all my campsites or my, you know, and that's kind of the voice in here that, and I am not expertise enough to know, but you've got a work group of staff who are looking at this and what enforcement would look like and what that would cost. And I appreciate that there's always a cost to enforcement. So I just would like some deeper thinking about this as we move forward.
We can do research to look at that. There could be two options. We could do research to look at what other states are doing and come back with some options. We could do propose a 25% increase on all campsites for non-residents and take public comment on it and let you know what the public comment is. And then you would have the option to adopt or not adopt that change.
If the 25% option, everybody says it's great, and then we try and implement it and it costs us more to implement than we've gained nothing. I really want to know too, when we did tax policy, it was always, what do you get and what do you pay to get it?
Right.
And so that's part of the equation that I would.
So we can do both of those at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, we'll go with Commissioner Azumi first.
Yeah, thanks, Katie, for all this great work. I agree with Commissioner Berger's comments. I think that this would be a good opportunity to open the conversation about differential pricing for these different sites. And then just also thinking about the SCORP and what we learned today. And I know that there is a kind of like a, you know, administrative issue that comes up when you're charging people different rates, but I just want to have on the record that, you know, one of the audiences that I noticed on the SCORP that had more difficult access were people with lower incomes. And while like a $50, you know, campsite or tent may not seem like a lot for some people, if somebody wants to go with their family for a weekend, it really puts that opportunity out of reach.
So, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we open rulemaking, and my motion is the words that are on the screen.
And to include 25% increase for all camping, all out of state.
A discussion of what, I don't want to put a 25% in there. A discussion of out-of-state pricing, what it would look like.
So that discussion would happen at the staff level,
Right.
as opposed to in the rulemaking.
Well,
So it would be left out of the rulemaking.
not necessarily.
So can I suggest that ought to be two separate motions so we don't confuse that?
Okay.
And
Oh,
Chair Grassley
okay.
or Commissioner Grassley, can I ask you to add
Rule 6, the definition section, just in case we need to have that open to add a definition as well.
Yes, that'd be my motion.
Thank you.
Okay. I will second what he said. But I'll add here that Commissioner Berger and Izumi both kind of took the words out of my mouth. I was prepared to say that we need to have a more, because I do feel that the rates in here are entirely justified based on what we know of the actual costs of providing the services to visitors. And based on the economic analysis we heard yesterday, it's clear we have room to move compared to other states to catch up with just what's normal in other state park systems. And the two realities that Commissioner Berger and Izumi mention are linked to my mind, because the out-of-state, in-state debate also relates to the fact that we don't want to create unreasonable barriers to underserved and low-income Oregonians having access to their own parks. And so I view those as linked facts. And so I would put that out as, again, maybe a separate motion. So I will start by seconding what Commissioner Grasty just said. And we'll go ahead and vote on that, but I do as a
that are before us, and then I'll entertain more discussion.
To open them.
To open the rulemaking for the rules that are before us, and then I can entertain more discussion and a potential amendment. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of opening this rulemaking, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Hearing none. Do we have any amendments that want to be proposed? So the way that I understand this, we will be moving forward into a rulemaking after we leave this. And so if we do not include anything related to increased camping fees in this language, then we won't have that discussion.
Right.
until
If
down the
you
road.
want us to get public comment on increasing out-of-state rates on other campsites, we would need you to open that piece. It doesn't mean we have to do it, but we need your authorization to open it. And then if we do staff research and find that the administrative costs are more, then we could not move forward with the rulemaking, but we would need your authorization to open it to begin with.
So I'm sure our attorney has a citation of what we're going to open as a.
I think you just opened
You
it.
did.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just direction to the agency
Modify the
to include consideration
Okay.
of that.
So I would move that within this rulemaking process, staff look at what possible out-of-state differentials might be workable, and to gather public input on the possibility of out-of-state differentials. Is that enough?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
think so.
flexible.
in a way, I'd love to see staff think creatively about how we avoid creating unreasonable barriers to low-income Oregonians' access to parks. But I don't want to complicate this any more than it needs to be.
Yeah.
So I
think within that range,
Yeah.
I mean, that's direction to the staff. I
Right,
think through
right,
that
right,
range
right.
of-
So I'm comfortable not going beyond or trying to wordsmith anything Commissioner Berger has presented. I think I'm comfortable with that. I think that.
In our staff work group, that is that balance.
High priority.
It's a very big concern of our staff that recognizing the places that we protect and manage, we want Oregonians to be able to participate and want them open and welcoming and accessible. So we really work hard at managing that balance.
This is also the glory of the range system, where we're not locked into a number.
Right.
All right, so I have a motion on the table that within this rulemaking, we're voting on an amendment to have staff look at the possible out-of-state differentials that could be applied for camping and
Campsite.
just campsites.
Yep.
Just-
Or
Or
other,
camping and day use activities.
I'll
Do you want
second
to add
that,
the use?
please.
Just camping.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, yes.
Do I have a second?
So I have one bit of discussion here.
Can I get a second before? we move
Second.
on? Okay, Commissioner Dewar, I have a second.
Sorry.
Any discussion on the amendment at hand?
So one of the things that we need to recognize that we're doing in increasing fees. There's little doubt in my mind that we're pushing people on to disperse camping on public lands, which is dramatically a piece of the landscape on the east side. I don't know how we balance that, and I don't even know if there's a way to look at that. But if there is, I hope staff will try and take a look at that, because it's already getting overwhelmed.
Thank you. All right, any further comments?
Just clarification.
Yeah, go
When you
ahead.
said camping, your cabin is a camping, right? That's included?
It gives permission for staff to look at
All of those
all
different.
of the
okay.
overnight camping
overnight.
options
Stays.
for out
Thank
of
you.
state. And they'll come back with what they find.
It would be these and then all of those.
Camping and glamping.
All right, so all those in favor of including the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Hearing none, the amendment passes. Do I have to do anything else? All right.
Have fun with this.
With that, does that gives everybody enough?
Yep, that's,
coverage?
we're plenty of flexibility.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I know this is all kind of
You?
wonky, but it's, based on the conversations that we've been having this last
Right.
year and looking at budget, it's definitely an important
I should do
piece
that
that
more
we
often.
need to be considering, but also taking into account, making sure that Oregonians across all economic spectrums have access to our state parks and camping. So, thank you. All right.
you.
Our next one is 9C. Request to adopt amendment 736-040-0070, which is a correction of the Maupin boundary description.
Great. Chair Hill, Director Assumption, members of the commission, Katie Gauthier here with agenda item 9C, and this is our last one for rulemaking today. And we are requesting you to adopt rulemaking on the correction of the Maupin boundary. You may remember we requested opening rulemaking at the last commission meeting in April. This item was discovered when a proposed development in the city of Maupin along the Deschutes Scenic Waterway, or along the Deschutes River, it was proposed, and the question was it in the scenic waterway? And we discovered that when the rule was passed in 1970, it described the boundary as the city of Maupin's boundary as established in 1970. And there was a statute later passed that described it as 1977, and the boundary changed in the meantime. But the rule was never changed to reflect the change in statute. So to make that clear, this dashed line is the 1970 boundary that is currently reflected in our rule language. The solid line is the 1977 boundary that's reflected in statute. And this area down in the lower corner is where the boundaries, where Maupin has had development, and the question came, is it in the scenic waterway or not? So we opened public comment on the change from May 1st to May 31st. We provided information about the rulemaking and opportunity to comment to the city of Maupin, Jefferson County Planning Department, the property owner who had initially asked the question, our agency interested parties list, statewide media. We did receive 2 comments that are in your packet in support of the change. And there is a slight change in the language from what we had initially proposed. Instead of specifying the date, we are referencing it as the statutory definition. So if the statute changes again, we don't have to make a change in the statute. And there was, just to make it clear, we moved some words around to make it a little clearer that it's the city of Maupin is excluded. And then the second one, it's again, the boundaries outside of the city of Maupin. So happy to answer questions, or the request is to adopt.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion to adopt the amendments to 736 040 0070 correction of Maupin boundary description.
Thank you, Commissioner Grasty. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Cribbins. Any further discussion on this? Questions? We're good. Okay.
Was it you? Okay, it was Betty.
Oh,
I was willing to take credit.
I was like, it was Commissioner Azumi for the record with the second. Thank you. See, it's late in the day.
It's good. We're almost done.
We're almost there. All right, all those in favor of adopting this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Hearing none, the motion passes. We're on reports, if anything needs to be reported. Other than.
Unless
what's
you
in-
guys have questions or you need anything from it, it's just reports for you to peruse in your own sleepy time.
All right, none, and then commission planning calendar.
Yeah, and so unless anybody's changed their calendars on the commission planning, and I think we've checked in with Joel and I think everything works. This was the only meeting that was a little bit of a conflict for him. And so I think we're okay unless anybody else has changes. Our September meeting will be, you'll be seeing Beverly Beach. Hopefully we'll have it open. So if you didn't hear, we had to delay the opening because of the contract work there. So we've got a lot of unhappy campers right now, but we're close. You guys will get to see it, and we'll be over in Newport, and I will see if I can get Lincoln County commissioners to spend some time with us.
That would be
wonderful. Awesome.
Maybe not.
It would be.
And do we have any idea where November is gonna be? We don't have to decide right now.
We're gonna be a St. Louis.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
fun.
You'll look at the Go Bomb project stuff there.
Madam Chair, before we adjourn, I think Commissioner Durr holds the record for thanking staff all the time. And before we quit, I want to say thanks to Doug and Jamie for you guys. As Jamie, you're taking care of us in this meeting, and Doug, all you do here, we appreciate it for sure. Yeah.
As you can tell, none of us could do any of that.